Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 19th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Richmond Selectboard. Before we jump in, is there any public comment on any topic not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Are there any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, we will go ahead and jump into our first item on the agenda. Item A, consideration of approving the use of the town center for the Richmond Holiday Market. The holiday market basically takes place on December 6th. It would be in this building, right?
Yep, and Sue's here if you want her to, she's connecting to audio. But yeah, this has happened for a number of years. It sort of took a little hiatus during the COVID times. And I think last year was maybe its first year back, and they set vendors all up in the common spaces of this building as well as outside and over at the church.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Would anyone care to make a motion?
Go ahead. This is Bard. I move to approve the use of the town center building for the holiday market on Saturday, December 6th, 2025, with setup occurring on the evening of Friday, December 5th, 2025.
Would anybody like to second that?
Adam, second.
We have a
Yes.
motion made by Bard Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to approve the use of the town center building for the holiday market on Saturday, December 6th, 2025, with setup occurring on the evening of Friday, December 5th, 2025. Okay, seeing no hands up, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, aye. Bard, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. If Sue gets connected to the audio, we will let her know that next. Okay, our next item on the agenda is consideration of approving leases with town center tenants. Briefly, we're talking about Mount Mansfield Community Television, the Community Senior Center, the Richmond Historical Society, and our Community Cares Camp. Do you want to summarize what we're looking at here? Everybody but MMCTV pays $1 a year, and MMCTV pays market rate, correct?
Basically, yes. And this was on the agenda a few weeks ago. The board wanted to see a clause added in that allowed for the town to move a leasee to a similar space for reasons for renovation or for reasons other than renovation if the town just decided there was a better layout, more effective use. So I worked with MMCTV first. They've got the most technical things to move. So they just wanted to make sure that, the consideration would be given for their technical needs. So we made sure we added that into the wording. So this wording works for MMCTV and the other three tenants. And I think it allows us the flexibility to move them if we decide there's a better layout that serves the town better.
Questions or comments?
I think that's Adam, because you just logged in. Did you?
I didn't log in.
Oh, you didn't log in?
No.
How are you echoing then?
I don't, my audio is disabled.
You're good. You're good now.
Okay.
I don't know.
Thanks, whoever. Okay, any questions or?
No, we've kind of hashed it out last week, right? So.
Yeah. Okay, would you like to make a motion?
I move to approve the leases for MMCTV, Community Center, or Community Senior Center, and the Richmond Historical Society, our Community's Cares Camp. This Bard, I will second that.
Okay, I will be abstaining from this because I'm president of the board of MMCTV. And I don't want to have any ethical quandaries about my voting on something that I might have a benefit from. We have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bard Hill, to approve the leases with MMCTV, the Community Senior Center, the Richmond Historical Society, and our Community Cares Camp. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I. Bard, I.
David, we need your
David,
vote.
I.
And Jay abstains. The motion passes 3-0 and with one abstention. Okay. Our next item, we're rocketing through here so far, is consideration of approving an easement with Vermont Electric Power Company for access to the Andrews Community Forest. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. So this one was initially approved in December, and then there were some changes suggested by Vermont Land Trust, which is a co-holder on the easement to the town forest. When it came back to the board, you had some questions about how the fees were arrived at and were there attorney fees. So I looked into it. We have $504.50 in attorney fees And the fee was arrived at by a per linear feet as far as the easement goes. So what was it? It was a total of, share my screen here. $3.50 per linear foot of access of the easement, coming to $8,549.45.
Could you
Make it larger. Plus an additional $2,500 to pay for some repair on the vast trail that Velco has primarily been using to access the power lines. So that'll be returned to a good condition, and we'll have 85/49/45 going forward from the lease or from the easement. So I suggest removing the $504.50, putting that into a general revenue to pay back for the town attorney fees, and the rest of it going into the Andrews Community Forest Reserve Fund.
Okay. Questions or comments? Okay, would someone like to make the motion?
I think Bart would like to make this one.
This is Bart. I move to approve the easement for Velco for access to the power lines located in the Andrews Community Forest, which includes payments by Velco to the town of a $2,500 maintenance payment and an $8,549.45 easement payment for a total of $11,049.45, with $504.50 deposited into a general revenue account to cover legal fees, and the remaining $10,544.95 to be deposited into the Andrews Community Forest Reserve Fund, with $2,500 earmarked for repairs to the vast trail previously used by Velco, and to appoint town manager Josh Arneson as a duly authorized agent of the town of Richmond.
This is Adam, I second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood. I'm gonna forbear to read the entire motion because Bart just read it very clearly. But this ultimately is approving an easement in return for a payment, and that payment will be split up with the Andrews Community Forest Fund and repairs to the vast trail and sufficient monies to cover our legal fees. Any questions? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David? He may be having trouble unmuting.
David, I.
And Jay, I see Sue, you have joined the audio. We wanted to let you know that the motion to allow the holiday market to take place here on the 6th with setup on the 5th did pass.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Our next item on the agenda, item D, is consideration of applying for USA Pickleball Serves Grant to pay for a portion of the total cost of the pickleball courts. Now, I see that we have some members of the Parks Committee here, so come on up and tell us about this.
Told they had to be very quick tonight.
We do have a long agenda.
My name is Denise Barnard. I'm a member of the 3 Parks Committee, which includes Volunteers Green, Browns Court, and the all-around church, Green. So I'm here tonight on behalf of our committee to ask your permission to apply for a USA Pickleball Serves. It's called Play It Forward Grant Program. There's 2 $50,000 grants being awarded in the United States. It's a very, very, very long shot, but we thought we'd give it a shot. It doesn't hurt. 3 of us met last week here and went over the requirements. The pickleball courts installed in a public facility, permanently dedicated to pickleball. They must be installed and open for play within 12 months of receiving the money. And then we have to have a little placard. If we do get the $50,000 grant, we have to have a little placard on the court that says member of the USA Pickleball Association, which is a free membership. And then we also have to invite the ambassador to come, and we have to do a little presentation. Yeah, they want a photo op. But
The ambassador of the association, not of like Belize or.
no, of the association.
Okay.
And I was told Vermont has one, which we didn't even know that. So we clarified. That's one of the things we clarified this week was, does Vermont even have one? And they said they do. So we meet all the criteria with, with your approval. But like I said, it's a very small window. The grant opened on April 15th. It closes on June 3rd, and the announcement will be made on August 8th. The announcements of the grants will be made on August 8th, which is National Pickleball Day.
Oh,
Questions, comments? Okay,
seems like an obvious thing to apply for.
right,
Yeah,
and there's
but-
no cost to apply, right?
There's no cost to apply.
And we can invite the investor from the leads if we want.
Yes, we could. We absolutely could.
Okay,
And I'm still under my 5 minutes, so I'm just gonna let you
Great
know
job.
that the contractor is set to begin late summer. The water's being installed as soon as the equipment arrives. And that's all we're on track for right now. And so we're forging ahead.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So
It's an expensive plaque, $50,000. And thank you,
hey,
Denise.
it's worth a try.
Do we need a motion to approve it, or can they just approve it? Oh, I move to approve submitting the grant application for $50,000 to go toward the cost of pickleball courts.
This is Bart, I will second that.
okay, we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill to approve submitting the grant application for $50,000 to go toward the cost of pickleball courts. Any questions, comments from members of the board or the audience? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
Jay, aye.
It's quick.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is consideration of making appointments to boards, committees, commissions, and some appointed offices. For those of you listening at home or watching this later, application forms from all the applicants or almost all the applicants are in the packet. They're on the town website under this meeting. And the way this works is we're going to work through the various committees and so forth one at a time. So this will take a little bit of time. Anybody who is present who wants to speak in support of their request for appointment will, of course, be allowed to do so either remotely or here in person. And members of the audience watching at home or here in the room can also comment on the suitability of candidates for appointment or ask any questions they may have. Our first item on the agenda of these appointed offices is a development review board. The DRB, as we like to call it, has 1 3-year term open and 2 vacant alternate terms ending in 2026. Roger Peterson and Robert DePalma both applied. Roger Peterson is currently on the DRB. The term that's expiring is the term he's currently in. Robert DePalma would be new. His information in the packet is that he's new to Richmond, but that he is an extremely experienced attorney working on land use issues. So one of the two could be appointed or neither could be appointed, or we can appoint either of the candidates to a vacant alternate term. What's the pleasure of the board you wish to discuss?
Are both candidates present?
Roger Peterson.
Roger Peterson, and I do not see Bob or Robert on the web. Okay, Roger, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Can I make a pitch?
Sure.
You want me to do it from here or?
It sounds better here, but you don't, just make sure to identify yourself to the mic that we're getting.
My name is Roger Peterson. I'm on the DRB. And I'd like to have another term. By way of background. I moved to Richmond from Maryland 11 years ago. I have a law practice in Maryland, which I am currently working at part-time. It's basically a real estate practice. I was admitted to the bar in Maryland in 1975, which is 50 years ago, which is frightening. But I never lived in a small town before. I came to Richmond and I saw that there was an opening as an alternate on the DRB, and I thought, since I was in Maryland as a real estate attorney and I represented a lot of developers and was before boards, zoning boards and county boards, that I'd be useful on the other side of the table. I brought with me insight from a different jurisdiction, which I thought would be useful. and also my experience with developers. So I got on the DRB as an alternate, and my other endeavors to get used to the small town atmosphere was to be on the senior center board for a term, and also I serve as a guide at the Round Church. Anyway, back to the DRB, I quickly found out that the DRB was not just a board that enforced zoning regulations. To me, it seemed that everything that we decided had a big impact, small town, big impact, everything from someone subdividing his lot to a project like the creamery or the Gary Bressler's project down by the Round Church on Cochran Road. I found out that and I continue to find out that that the decisions we make are really based on not only the needs or requests of the applicant, but also because we have some discretion, we use that discretion to do what we can to keep the town, in my view, progressive, desirable, a good place to live, but yet a place that that has activity and is vibrant. So those are decisions that we make, and we consider all those things when we make them. And I like that. I think that's a lot better than just sitting there trying to make someone do what it says in the book to do. So I'd like to continue for another term. I still think that I have some gas in the tank, and I would like to do another term. So that's what I'm requesting tonight.
Awesome question.
Nope, I guess nothing off the top of my head. Correct.
Okay.
Trying to think of something very articulate to say.
Comment from the audience, Bradley, if you'd like to come up.
I'm Bradley Holt. I think most of you know me. So I previously raised this issue to the select board, but I believe you discussed this concern that I'd raised, but it, as far as I'm aware, it hasn't been addressed. Since this issue hasn't been dealt with, and it doesn't seem like there's a plan to discuss it tonight in the context of Roger's application, I wanted to raise this concern again tonight. I want to make sure that the select board takes into consideration Roger's attitude toward public engagement. In my opinion, town officials should value and encourage input from the public. Civic and community engagement, in fact, is highlighted in our 2018 town plan. What I've witnessed from Roger, as well as other DRB members, is a pattern of hostility toward public engagement. As one example, during the October 30th, 2024 DRB meeting, I asked to make a public comment on an agenda item. To be clear, this item was not a quasi-judicial proceeding. I was told by the DRB chair that I could not make a public comment on that matter, and I wasn't allowed to speak. This was a violation of Vermont's open meeting law, as well as the town's public meeting policy. And again, to be clear, this was not a quasi-judicial proceeding. During a quasi-judicial proceeding, the DRB certainly has the right to limit public comments. So that all leads me to what happened at the end of the meeting, which is, the DRB asked the public to leave as they're about to go into deliberative session. And after I left, the meeting was still being recorded because the DRB didn't immediately enter deliberative session. So in this recording, the DRB chair and Roger can be heard having a conversation about earlier in the meeting, telling me I wasn't allowed to speak. And during this conversation about me, Roger said, and I quote here, "I know, yeah, you said shut up. That was great." Roger continued, "We give these people much too much. I mean, God." So this is just one of the most obvious, observable, and egregious examples of Roger's attitude toward public engagement. This is a town official openly celebrating, telling a member of the public to shut up. Even worse, in violation of Vermont's open meeting law and the town's open public meeting policy. I mean, it shouldn't matter, but still, telling someone to shut up is really not really appropriate for a town official, and certainly not celebrating it. And I do want to remind the select board of the 2018 town plan's goal to increase civic infrastructure, community engagement, and communication through transparent government. The town has failed to meet several of the elements of this goal, including ensuring that all town staff, boards, and commissions are following the requirements of Vermont's open meeting law, creating an inclusivity policy, and creating a civility policy. So with this reappointment decision, you have an opportunity to demonstrate whether or not you are committed to these values of civic and community engagement. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Any questions?
Don't have anything.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert.
Mr. Forward, Jeff, come on up. Or you can stay there if you like.
It's David.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a senior moment. Mr. Sunshine.
Thank you. I would like rather stay here. I've been on the board. I'm fortunate to know both applicants. I've known Bob Palma, as I've dealt with him as a lawyer. I've known Roger for a long time. I find them both to be good applicants, and we're fortunate enough to have that. I would encourage the board, select board, to reappoint Roger. Roger has a great working knowledge of the ordinance and has contributed always to all the applications. He always comes to the meeting prepared, having read all of the items that were submitted by the various applicants. And often his input is excellent. Having said that, I think I would urge the board to take advantage of Bob DePalma putting in an application and appoint him to our alternate slot, which has remained empty for a long time. In that way, Bob would have a chance. He's only been in town a year. He would have a chance to be familiar with the ordinance, and when the time comes, possibly in a year, we might have a slot and he could step into it and be well prepared. I've discussed with the select board in the past, some of the comments that Bradley brought up. At the end of a long meeting, we're tired and sometimes things are said that shouldn't be said. We've talked about it at the board. We know the rules that we're under now, and we are trying very hard to pay attention to those ethical rules. And I believe we're doing so at the moment. So are we all perfect? No. Do we make mistakes? Yes. Do we learn from our mistakes? Yes. So I would urge the board to reappoint Roger and to put Bob on as an alternate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment from anybody? Roger?
Can I just make
Sure.
one comment, just to respond to Bradley? First of all, I don't disdain or try to cut short witnesses. And in this matter, this particular matter, and some other matters, people or witnesses submit a great deal of material to us to review. And we review it before the meeting. And I find it unnecessary and time consuming for the same material to be read by the witness that has already been submitted and reviewed by us. Especially when it's voluminous. And in this particular instance, that's what was being done. And that's what David discouraged. And so that was my concern. And I meant no personal, I have no personal thing against it, Bradley. I'm just saying that if it was new, I would have been happy to listen to it.
Yeah, if I can make a comment, just to make a correction on that. Yeah, this was the matter where this comment was made about celebrating and telling me to shut up was not a matter which I'd submit in any written comments. And in fact, my comments were going to be very brief in that meeting. And I hadn't submitted written comments about that. I think Roger's confusing this with a separate matter. But we could get into that. I'm not to get into that, but just to be clear that this was not an issue that was relevant to what Roger's mentioning now. So
To And say, do we have,
we have Robert's iPad on the call. Would this by any chance be Robert De Palma?
It is, yes.
Okay, hi, Robert.
Hi.
We would love to hear from you in support of your application to be on the Development Review Board.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all. So as my application indicated, my wife and I are fairly recent residents in Richmond. We bought a property on Williams Hill Road in December of 2023. And I have been wanting to be involved in some way in the town, and I thought that the Development Review Board would be a good opportunity for me given my skills and background. I am a lawyer. Some part of my work is working with municipalities and in particular with development review boards. So I have some knowledge of the structure and operation of such a board, and thought I could be a resource for that board and be of service. I don't, because I'm relatively new to the town, I don't understand all of the issues that the town is facing in its planning and zoning. But I thought the Development Review Board would be a good start for me because that's not a policymaking body. It's a body that applies the ordinances as they have been adopted by the select board. And it would give me an opportunity to get to know people in town more and to understand the issues that the town is facing. So not much more than that. I wanted to be of service, and I thought that was a way that I could to this town. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Robert, this is Bart Hill. Were you connected to audio to hear the conversation over the last 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, unfortunately not. I actually had to attend another city council meeting in an executive session, which just wrapped up, and I jumped onto this just as those comments were wrapping up.
So maybe if you have any reaction to this, so the current chair of the DRB, David Sunshine, recommended to the select board that we appoint Roger to the 3-year term, and that we appoint you to the vacant alternate term.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have any comments or reaction to that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I see that Roger's seat is the only one that's vacant, and that Roger's seeking to be reappointed, and I have no reason to challenge him for that seat. So I'd be happy to sit as an alternate and provide what assistance I can in that role. I do have a question. How does the board handle its alternates? Do they attend every meeting, or do they only attend when the board is not fully staffed?
So in the past, we have called upon the alternates if we know that there's going to be a vacancy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it would be asking a lot of an alternate to come in for no reason whatsoever. But we do have vacancies. We had a vacancy just the last meeting last week.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the alternate would take an active role.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Robert, this is Jay for Select Board Chairman. Of course, it depends on how much free time you've got, but if I were an alternate, I would likely show up at every meeting, simply that I would be well informed and not wind up in the dark when suddenly out of the blue I'm called on to attend and vote, but that would be up to you.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you on that. I just didn't know what the board's prior practice was, and I'd be happy to do it either way.
So we've dealt with this ethics dilemma a lot, and I know there's been a new ethics policy implemented, and so a lot of the actions that Bradley was referencing technically may not have been covered, and there was some lack of clarity around the difference between the line and whether it was a conflict of interest or engagement or the appearance or any of these different things. And so now we are under a state ethics policy, and that's all much more clear and uniformly implemented in the town and across the state. And so all that to say, we've really dove into this and reviewed the DRB's kind of actions and the complaints surrounding openness in public engagement.
Mhm.
And I am, was inclined to follow the chair's recommendation. But to be honest, Roger, hearing your kind of explanation and talking around this, and anything short of saying that the lack of openness had a reason, but it was unacceptable, makes me a no. And I think that after all of this, not appointing a new person to the DRB, whether it's you, your seat, or any seat, to shake it up and show that we clearly expect to change the direction this board is going, would be the town not doing our due diligence. So I know it's not going to follow the recommendation of the chair, but I'm going to make a motion. We appoint Robert DePalma to the full-term 3-term seat and Roger Peterson to the vacant alternate term.
Yeah, would your
Not
recommendation?
personal,
be that
but-
we
No,
separate those or?
You could separate them just to be clear, because
Okay.
one might be in favor of one, but not the other.
Sure. So I make a motion, we appoint Robert DePalma to a 3-year term.
Is there a second?
This is Bart. I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill to appoint Mr. Robert DePalma to the Development Review Board for a 3-year term. Is there any further discussion from any member of the audience or any member of the board?
Jay, this
Okay.
is David. I was trying to unmute again. I was going to second the motion, but Bart beat me to it. So I just wanted to say that I'm in support of the motion.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
We should vote on it at some point.
Okay, so please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, and then the second motion.
Would you be interested in the vacant seat, or do you not want to fill that role? I don't want to. Okay.
Okay, then we will
So-
leave the vacant / the alternate term open. Okay, we are now moving on to the next item in the nominations and appointments, the Andrews Community Forest Committee. There are. I'm not actually sure how this reads. You say there are 2 3-year terms, 1 3-year term for a seat fill. Oh, I get
By the
it.
Trails Committee
So
representative.
Sonia would
Yeah.
not be filling the Trails Committee slot.
Right, and I did get an email. I think the person that's currently filling the slot did not want to re-up. They would be willing to stay on for 2 or 3 more months, but I'm not sure how that works. Because their term's up, they're supposed to be going through a process of being recommended by the Trails Committee. So I think that seat almost remains vacant until the process is completed, would be my thought on that.
Okay.
And the current person, the Trails, I'm trying to see, is this the right one? Nope, that's Trails. The current Trails representative is Chase Rosenberg.
Okay, so we have an opening. And we have an applicant, Sonia Masterson. Her information was in your packet. I'm looking randomly around the room. I don't see Sonia on the call, but you might be sitting next to somebody else. Sonia, are you present? Seeing none. Any comments or questions from the board? Would you like to make a motion?
I guess it's pretty straightforward. I move to appoint Sonia Masterson to the 3-year term on the ACFC committee.
This is Bart. I will second that.
And we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to appoint Sonia Masterson to the open 3-year slot, one of the open 3-year slots on the Andrews Community Forest Committee. Is there any comment before we vote? Okay, seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Our next item would be the Conservation Commission. We have 1 opening for a 4-year term and 1 opening for an alternate. I'm saying this not because we have any candidates, no one applied, but I'm saying this to the public at large. Should you be interested in the opportunity to serve on the Conservation Commission, we would love to hear from you. We don't only appoint this time of year. And if you have questions about the Conservation Commission, their contact information is on the town website, or we can help hook you up. The next item is the Parking Advisory Committee. There are currently no openings and no one applied. The Planning Commission, next, has no open slots. The Recreation Committee is, for want of a better word, kind of moribund in that there are 5 terms open. 2 3-year terms, 2 2-year terms ending in 2026, 1 vacant 3-year term ending in 2026. We have no applicants, but we would be interested in any discussion that could be had about reviving that committee. And if you'd like to talk to us about that, we would love to hear from you. Moving on, Town Center Building and Campus Committee. There is 1 1-year term and 1 open-ended select board term. Kara LaBounty applied. All the other seats on the committee are open-ended, but when the motion was made last year to appoint Kara to the committee, it was made for a 1-year term, which Josh thinks may have been a mistake, given that all the other terms were open-ended. So the matter before us is, do we appoint her again? And is it for another 1-year term, or do we change it to open-ended to be like all the others?
Guess I'm the person on this one. It makes sense to have all the terms the same, I think. And Kara has been serving diligently on the committee and showing up to meetings and doing stuff pretty actively, so.
Would you like to make a motion?
I move to appoint Kara LaBounty to an open-ended term on the Town Center Building and Campus Committee.
This is Bart. I will second that.
And we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to appoint Kara LaBounty to the Town Center and Building Committee for an open-ended term. Is there any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay. So on the Trails Committee, which is next, it says 4 3-year terms, 1 vacant term ending in 2026. So how many slots are open? 4?
5, because we have 4 3-year terms and a vacancy that's open as well.
It's for, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a vacant term. Yeah,
Okay,
it has
so
1
they-
year left on it.
Okay, so there's a term with 1 year left on it, and then there are 4 3-year terms. We have applications from Allison Aiken, Jean Bresser, and Trum Rittling. And I'm looking around, I don't see them in the room. And I'm looking at the names on the Zoom. Are Allison, Jean, and or Trum present? Okay, seeing none. We do have. Actually, let me clarify another thing. And we have Allison and Jean in one motion, and we have Trum in another motion. Is there a reason for that?
I'm not really sure there's a specific reason. I think you could do anything you like. You can appoint them all to 3-year terms. You could appoint one of them to the vacancy for 1 year. I think we just tried to give you a sample motion that
Okay.
you could use. And if you want to continue the practice of doing individual, it might be helpful. Again, I don't know if there's that way, if somebody doesn't want to approve one person, they can vote no on that one, but yes on the other 2.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
This is Bart. I'm following up on one at a time. I move to appoint Allison Aiken to the Trails Committee to a 3-year term.
Adam, second.
Any comment? Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to appoint Allison Aiken to a 3-year term on the Trails Committee. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
Jay, aye.
Jay, I would like to move to appoint Jean Bresser to a 3-year term on the Trails Committee.
This is Adam, second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to appoint Jean Bresser to a 3-year term on the Trails Committee. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
And Jay, aye.
And Jay, I would furthermore like to move to appoint Trum Rittling to a 3-year term on the Trails Committee.
This is Adam, a second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to appoint Trum Rittling to a 3-year term on the Trails Committee. Any discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, moving on, we have the Transportation Committee, which has several terms open. We have 1 3-year term that would begin this year, and we have 4 3-year terms that are vacant that would be scheduled to end in 2026. We have no applicants. So as I said before, if there's anybody on the call who would like to help revive that committee, we would love to hear from you.
I think that one's similar to the Recreation Committee where it currently has one member, so we need at least two more to get going.
Okay, we have the Gardening Committee. There are 3 2-year terms. We have no applicants. The same statements as before apply. Keeping on going, the Housing Committee. The Housing Committee has 2 3-year terms and 1 alternate 2-year term open. Connie Van Egan is currently on the committee and has applied to for a 3-year term.
Jay, this is Bard. I would like to move to appoint Connie Van Egan to a 3-year term on the Housing Committee.
Do we have a second?
This is Adam, second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood to appoint Connie Van Egan to a 3-year term on the Housing Committee. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, the next one is the 4th of July Parade and Fireworks Committee. There are several people who should have applied. We told them to, because the active committee membership is approximately 7 or 8 people, but only myself, Julie Wallen, Stephanie Hartsfield, and Rebecca Roos applied. Legally, this means, well, there are how many slots? There's 9 slots in the committee.
You need at least one more applicant to have a quorum.
Yes, that's the awkward position you.
I mean, there's 11. You could vote to approve these 4 and reduce the committee size.
That's my point.
Do you anticipate that other people just failed to apply or
They just failed to apply,
they want to continue doing the work?
to the best of my knowledge. For example, our
What
chairman,
would you like us to do? Should we
Okay,
shrink the committee size or
I
should we
think we should
give them
change
one
the
more?
committee size to 7, appoint these 4, which would give us a legal quorum, and then we should reappoint the other 3.
Well,
At the
there's
next meeting.
Okay.
There's Sue, there's Amanda,
there's
and
11 actually.
yeah, Sue Glennon. Okay. Ken doesn't take part. Oh, Justin does take part.
Okay.
Harlan does not, and Chris Jenkins does. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 4 active people. So if we appoint these 4 and we appoint the other 4, I would say let's reduce the committee size to 9, because there are people who are on the committee, frankly, because they always helped back when it was kind of an independent committee. And for old time's sake, they got put on the committee, but they don't come to meetings. And
So it's kind of makes your quorum tougher.
it does.
Sure.
So I would suggest 2 motions, 1 to appoint these 4 and a second to set the size of the committee at 9.
Is that going to, I just want to ask, is that going to give you a quorum issue? We've got 6 weeks to the 4th
Okay,
of
yes,
July.
you're absolutely right.
So do we just
4
appoint, do we just
Ooh.
reappoint all 11?
I don't know the statutory.
We could reappoint all
considerations around
11.
this.
And then, I mean, if you're getting quorums now, you've got a month to go.
Do we need people to specifically apply to a committee they are active on to be reappointed?
Well, if they're
Or can we just
1-year
do it?
terms.
They need to reapply or can we appoint them?
I think, I mean, you could,
Is that
I
illegal?
think if Jay has a pretty good sense that they all want to, they've all been showing up for the last 3 months, getting ready.
Like, if this was the DRB, I would not do that.
Right,
Not
but-
that this committee is unimportant, Jay, but there is less.
Simplest
legal
way is to just
implications
reappoint
for
all
this.
current members.
Yeah, I think and I think in this case, I think they honestly just forgot to apply probably. Because
Okay.
in years past, we've basically reappointed everybody. I agree with you, the severity of
This committee,
it's a
there's
little,
no long-term decisions that are being made.
there's no legally
Well,
binding
we're spending
decisions,
money. We're asking to spend money.
but there's no legally binding
Recommend
decisions
it.
about people's property that's being made.
Since, you guys aren't spending the money, we still have to approve it.
That's
I'm
right.
comfortable with that.
Okay,
If
so
there's,
the
if there ends
motion-
up being a legal reason afterwards, then we can fix it.
So the legal motion that I would recommend would be I move to reappoint all current members to a 1-year term.
This is Adam. I move to reappoint all current members of the 4th of July Parade and Fireworks Committee to a 1-year term.
This is Bard. I will second that.
And we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill to reappoint everybody who's on the 4th of July Parade and Fireworks Committee to another 1-year term.
I have a quick mechanics
Take that.
question. Is there any way to get this schedule of reappointments different than everything else so that it's reappointed right after the 4th?
That would make.
Yeah,
4th of
no,
July?
that's a good idea.
It seems reappointing in May for the 4th of July doesn't quite make sense, but
That's a good point.
In terms of a business cycle.
maybe we don't want to do that now. I don't know what we have to do.
I would just let it slide for now, but
Okay.
so,
We'll add it to Josh's list.
Yeah.
Writing it down right now.
Any further thoughts? Okay, you've heard the motion to reappoint everybody. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Keeping on going, the Volunteers Green and Brown Court Project Committee, whom we heard from tonight, there are no currently available slots and no one applied. We have the committee to explore path funding. The aforementioned path is a path from the vicinity of downtown out to the park and ride, either along Route 2 or via an alternate route.
And further.
And further, you're absolutely right, to the Riverview Commons as well. Thank you for the clarification. There are 3 one-year terms. Gary Bresser, Jared Katz, and Mark Aiken have all applied. All 3 are currently on the committee.
This is Bart. I move to appoint Gary Bresser, Jared Katz, and Mark Aiken to one-year terms on the committee to explore path funding.
This is Adam, I second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to appoint Gary Bresser, Jared Katz, and Mark Aiken to one-year terms on the committee to explore path funding.
I got a quick comment. I had a great conversation with Mark last week. He was just calling to kind of check in, and I know this committee hasn't really been in touch with us much. They haven't given us like a lot of updates, and he was indicating that they expect to be back in the near future to kind of give us an update. And then he was also asking, and I think he's going to reach out to Josh or you, but I think their goal now is they have seen how other projects, I think most iconically the sidewalk project, had full funding and yet stumbled because people weren't looped in and didn't have buy-in in it. And so they're trying to wrangle with, they have some ability to find funding, but most of those funding sources require the plan to be much further along than it is now. And their fear is that they get a plan further along, or someone does, and they can secure a large percentage or a good percentage of funding. And then it still stumbles and falls apart because there's not buy-in of all the stakeholders, mostly property owners along the path. And so I think they're kind of thinking that either the committee needs to take this on, or there needs to be a concerted effort to get that buy-in during the design process so that the funding is the final step.
Right.
And so we appoint them all, but I think they're going to be here to discuss all that at some point.
Right.
So we should,
I had a-
they're an active committee, even though we haven't heard from
Right,
them.
and I had a nice conversation with Jared today.
Great.
And I'll just he kind of said the same thing. They do not want to start talking dollars until they talk to the stakeholders, because they don't want to ask for way too little money if they need more. They really like to have a better idea of what the money would need to be. And so they will be talking to us, but they want to engage first.
Yeah. It sounds like they kind of want our blessing to do that engagement. So it's well thought out.
Yep. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor to appoint Gary, Jared, and Mark to a one-year term on the committee to explore path funding. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, so that's the committees, I believe. Now we have other volunteer openings. The next one is zoning administrator and E911 coordinator. This office has been filled until recently by Tyler Masha, our outgoing zoning administrator. Keith Oborn is handling zoning and planning duties for the time being. And so the suggested motion would be to appoint Keith to a 3-year term as a zoning administrator and E911 coordinator. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Do we have a motion?
This is Bart. I move to appoint Keith Oborn to a 3-year term as the zoning administrator and E911 coordinator.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander, to appoint Keith Oborn to a 3-year term as a zoning administrator and E911 coordinator. Any discussion? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
Aye.
David?
David,
Does that sound
I.
like- Okay, and Jay, aye.
Was more clear.
Okay. Okay, our next item on the agenda is service officer, which hardly anybody knows what that even is. Josh, you want to take a stab at it?
So my understanding is it was somebody that could help connect people, residents in need with services, but since the advent of 211, that's really sort of filled that gap, and the service officer, I don't think we've even had one for the last couple of years. Before that, it was Assistant Clerk Martha Lang, and she said even in her last couple of years, she didn't really do much. There wasn't a lot to do because people would call 211. There were other ways to find resources. So right now there's nobody applied, and I don't think it's been filled for a couple of years, and we really haven't felt the need to have one.
And neither one of your kids wants it.
Not just yet.
Okay. So we'll just bypass that one. Next is Animal Control Officer. We have one opening for 1-year term. Our town constable, Andy Squires, has applied. He has experience doing this. Any discussion?
I've worked with Andy and he's great to work with, so.
Jay, in the interest of time, I'd like to move to appoint Andy Squires as Animal Control Officer for a 1-year term.
Adam, second?
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood to appoint Andy Squires as Animal Control Officer for a 1-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
Jay, aye. Next is Emergency Management Director, one opening for a 1-year term. Town Manager Josh Arneson has served in the role for the past 6 years and is willing to serve again.
Jay, this is Bart. I would like to move to appoint Josh Arneson as the Emergency Management Director for a 1-year term.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
We have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander to appoint Josh Arneson as the Emergency Management Director. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Congratulations, Josh.
Like every other application, everyone says, I'm eager to serve again, or I would love to serve again, and Josh says, I am willing to serve again.
Well, given that he gets
I'm a-
blamed every time there's an emergency.
I understand it's been a long few years.
Well, just happy to have some work in the last couple of years for the emergency portion of my job. Wish there was less of it going forward.
Okay, our next slot is Energy Coordinator. Briefly, could you explain to people what that even is?
Boy, if Jeff Ford was here. I thought you were gonna have to
Energy Coordinator
explain. No.
has no actual decision-making power, but he's in charge of advising the town
I
on
think-
conservation and emergency-related issues.
I think that's a great summary.
Okay, no one applied. So if anybody on the call is thinking, I have a passion for discussing solar and nuclear and wind power and conserving energy in the town, please let us know. We would love to hear from you. Next is Tree Warden. We have a 1-year term for Tree Warden and 1-year term for a Deputy Tree Warden. Caitlin Littlefield is our current Tree Warden and has applied to be reappointed. Matt Leonetti has applied for Deputy Tree Warden and would like to be reappointed.
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Caitlin Littlefield as Tree Warden for a 1-year term and to appoint Matt Leonetti as Deputy Tree Warden for a 1-year term.
This is Adam, a second?
Okay, we have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to appoint Caitlin Littlefield as Tree Warden for a 1-year term and Matt Leonetti as Deputy Tree Warden for a 1-year term. Is there any discussion? I'm scanning the screen, don't see either of them on here. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Next, it's Town Fence Viewer. Town Fence Viewer is one of those long established positions that really has very little to do these days. It does not determine the boundary line. It basically rules on a shared fence between any two properties if the homeowners request an opinion. My wife, Carol Furr, had been fence viewer for some time. Last year, she took a year off from the overwhelming burden and has applied to be appointed once again.
This is Adam. I move to appoint Carol Furr as the town fence viewer for a 1-year term.
This is Bart. I will second that.
Hey, we have, Carol's not present. Okay, we have a motion from Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to appoint Carol Furr as town fence viewer for a 1-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Next is Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood. We have a 1-year opening for a 1-year term. That's redundant. John Cart applied and is the current holder of this position. He would like to continue serving.
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint John Cart as Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood for a 1-year term.
This is Adam, a second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood to appoint John Cart to continue as inspector of lumber, shingles, and wood. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay,
David,
next-
I.
Oh, I'm so sorry, David. And David, I. Okay, our next position is weigher of coal. Weigher of coal is another statutory job that has really no responsibility. The position was intended to weigh shipments of coal or deliveries of coal to make sure that if a coal vendor told you you're getting 100 weight, that you actually were getting 100 weight. The law says that you have to use the official municipal scales. No town in Vermont has official municipal scales. We, at one point, were up to having 4 co-fence viewers, then we've dropped back down to 2, and now it's just down to 1. I have applied on the current holder. I get to ask this all the time. So how much coal have you actually weighed? The answer is I haven't weighed any, but tonight, as a treat, that is 2.4 ounces. I have now weighed coal.
You seem qualified to me. I mean,
I want to see you stack like 2,000 pounds of coal in that thing. Dr.
Okay,
Seuss book.
We're one at a time.
is there a motion?
I move to appoint Jay Fur as the weigher of coal for one more exciting year.
This is Bart. I will second that.
And we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill to appoint Jay Fur to another exciting year as weigher of coal for 1-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
I'm really tempted to build a lumber and shingle fence to divide up my coal and just get all of you there to argue about it.
Absolutely.
But I
Okay.
do have other things to do, so I won't
Yes,
actually do it.
our next one is Lake Iroquois Recreation District appointee. The Lake Iroquois Recreation District is made up of representatives from Heinsberg, Williston, and Richmond. And June Heston has applied to be our appointee for a 2-year term. There are no other applicants.
This is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint June Heston as a Lake Iroquois Recreation District appointee for a 2-year term.
This is Adam, my second.
Okay, we have a motion to appoint June Heston as Lake Iroquois Recreation District appointee for a 2-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
And J.I. Next is the Richmond Rescue Board of Directors Liaison Representative. The Richmond Rescue is an independent body, but we have the right to appoint a member to their board of directors as our liaison. Amy Warwell has applied and currently serves in this role. This would be for a 1-year term.
This is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Amy Wardwell as Richmond Rescue Board of Directors Liaison Representative for a 1-year term.
This is Adam, second.
Okay, we have a motion and second, motion by Bart Hill, second by Adam Wood, to appoint Amy Warwell as Richmond Rescue Board of Directors Liaison Representative for a 1-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
And J.I. On the home stretch, we only have 7 more. Next is Tilden Solid Waste District, an opening for a 2-year term on their board, and we also have an opening for an alternate. Despite what people may think, since Casella runs our local waste depot, Richmond is still part of the CSWD. We have the right to use all their drop-off locations and benefit from their services. They just don't happen to run our local dump. Andrew French has applied and currently serves in this role. Would be an appointment for a 2-year term.
This is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Andrew French to the Chittenden Solid Waste District for a 2-year term.
This is Adam, second.
Okay, we have a motion by Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood to appoint Andrew French to the CSWD board for a 2-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, I.
David, I.
And J.I. Next, the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Board of Directors, 1 opening for an alternate 2-year term. Now, I believe, Bart, you are currently on that board as a full member,
Yes.
correct? And you're president or vice president?
I am El Jefe.
Okay, I'll have it. So this is,
I am currently vice chair and soon will be chair, or at least that's the plan.
and Charlie, I see up there, he's doing a good job. Okay, well, this is an appointment for an alternate position, alternate 2-year term. I'm the only one who.
This is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Jay Fur to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Board of Directors for an alternate 2-year term.
Adam, second.
Okay, we have a motion to appoint Jay Fur to the CCRPC Board of Directors for an alternate 2-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay abstain. Next, the CCRPC Planning Advisory Committee. We have one opening for a representative and one opening for an alternate. Keith Thorborn has filled the role as representative, and Planning Commission Chair Virginia Clark has served as the alternate for the past few years. What is your pleasure?
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Keith Thorborn as the Richmond representative and Virginia Clark as the alternate Richmond representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Planning Advisory Committee.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander to appoint
Impressive.
Keith Thorborn as our representative and Virginia Clark as our alternate representative to the CCRPC Planning Advisory Committee. Please state your name and your vote.
This is Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And J.I. Next, Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations. This is another body that many people don't know exists. It is a cooperative body operated by most of the towns in Chittenden County to fund detectives and officers to investigate crimes against children and other crimes, typically of a sexual nature. I am currently serving on that board. I'm the only applicant. There is a motion in the packet.
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint you, Jay Fur, to the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations Policy Board for a 1-year term.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander to appoint Jay Fur to the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations Policy Board for a 1-year term. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And J.I. 2 left. The CCRPC Transportation Advisory Committee. Josh had served in that role for the past several years and is willing to serve again.
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Josh Arneson as the Richmond representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Planning Advisory Committee.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
We have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander to appoint Josh Arneson as the Richmond
Actually,
representative.
Sorry, I messed that motion up. It was supposed to be Transportation Advisory Committee.
Oh, sorry.
Bart read it as I wrote it, but David, that's my first notice typo in the memo, so mark me down.
The revised
That's
motion.
one.
There you
The
go.
motion is to appoint Josh Arneson as a Richmond representative to the Chittenden County
He always
Regional
keeps
Planning
track.
Commission
Right.
Transportation Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I. And for the record, I second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. And Jay, last one before we move on to other business. The Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Clean Water Advisory Committee. Keith Thorborn has served in this role for the past several years and will be willing to do it again.
Jay, this is Bart. I'd like to move to appoint Keith Thorborn as the Richmond representative to Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Clean Water Advisory Committee.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander to appoint Keith Thorborn as a Richmond representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Clean Water Advisory Committee. State your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And J.I. Okay, I want to thank all of the volunteers for these committees, appointed positions and offices. We could not operate this town government without you. So pat yourself in the back, and we look forward to working with you over the next year.
Jay, I just want to second what you said. It takes a lot of community input and volunteering to make a town government run. And Richmond's very fortunate to have volunteers stepping up. And I just want to also pass along thanks for the people who volunteered to step up and fill these positions.
Okay, well, I agree with you, David. So thank you again, everybody. Our next item on the agenda is presentation of the Cochran Road Corridor and Scoping Study, exploring traffic calming and bicycle and pedestrian usage in Cochran Road and the Cochran Road Speed Study. Now we have Keith Thorborn leaping up to the table to speak, and we also have Eric Mackey, an engineer who is here remotely. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. Hello.
So who wants to go first to present these studies?
Well, I'll just do a quick introduction. Keith Oborn, Director of Planning and Zoning. This is the Cochran Road corridor study. This is hopefully our final iteration of this. We have provided a suite of options with costs that have been clarified. We did have our public hearing last week or I think about a month ago, 6 weeks ago.
Just probably more like 6 weeks ago.
More like 6 weeks ago. And we're here to present what hopefully is our final, and obviously we'll take comment and adjust if need be. And I guess, Eric, I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Keith. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to. Hey, guys.
Okay.
Okay, great. So as Keith mentioned, we're here basically as the final meeting, going over the study, and we also did submit the final report that accompanies this. So I don't really have much new compared to the last time I was here, just to basically summarize the final results. So let me just quickly go through. I know there's other agenda items that need to be going over tonight. So this is the final meeting. We started off with a local concerns meeting last year, where we got some great input and learned about unsafe conditions on the roadway, that the road is narrow, there's no shoulders, there's no sidewalk, or we have narrow shoulders. Cars tend to speed and there's a limited sight distance. There's limited parking at the trails. There's a floodplain in the area along the length of the road, and we have right-of-way constraints. And generally, the village areas lack sidewalks and parking. So from that, we developed the purpose and need statement, which was to develop and identify a recommended alternative for Cochran Road that improves safety and mobility for non-motorized users. And the need was that Cochran Road is considered deficient based on the narrow roadway width, the vehicle speeds, and the general alignment of the road. Residents are concerned about high-speed traffic, lack of space for pedestrians and cyclists along the corridor. So the study basically had three components, a part A, a part B, and a part C, coinciding with the Richmond Village, Jonesville, and then the length of the corridor itself. So starting at Richmond Village, basically we start at the THBC intersection and then go to the east approximately to St. Mary's Cemetery parking spot. And the recommendations that we developed was to add sidewalks on both sides of the street. The sidewalk would be set back with a grass strip, and we could also consider adding some crosswalk markings near the Round Church roadway. We would maintain all the existing speed humps and speed feedback signs that are here. So generally adding the sidewalks. We did see from being out on the roadway that there are some constraints. You can see in this photo, this is the south side of the road. This is looking to the east towards Cochran ski area. There's a lot of ledge and rock outcroppings that would make widening the road difficult. Also the utility poles, and then on the north side of the road, which is on the left here of the picture, is the drop off to the river side and the floodplain issues. So what Keith mentioned is we developed a suite of options of different sidewalks of different lengths on the north and the south side, as well as signs and pavement markings and other kind of miscellaneous engineering and construction issues. From that, we developed some pricing for the Richmond end of the corridor. And the pricing was developed using the V-Trans bicycle and pedestrian a unit cost report from 2020. So a change from our past presentation is that we added a cost escalation factor from 2020 to reach 2026, assuming that a project would take place next year. The general discussion was that a lot of these items are too expensive. We understand that. So later on in the report, we have some lower cost, shorter term alternatives that we're going to present. Moving over to Jonesville, we had the same recommendation. So for the portion of Cochran Road starting around 2944 Cochran Road on the westerly end and moving towards the Huntington River, we're recommending sidewalks on both sides of the road, similar to Richmond, with grass strips separating. And then as we head to the east of the Huntington River, we're recommending a different sidewalk configuration, a sidewalk that does not have a grass strip that's up against the edge of the road, because there are some more constrained areas. There's not as much space as there is to the west. We also had recommended a couple of small gravel parking areas. One is up by the bridge at the Winooski River, which is currently an area that you could pull off and park, but the second spot that we recommended, we know that it's currently within a no parking area, but we're still suggesting to think about adding a little more parking in this area of the meadow, so that people have more access to the recreational space, the open space, and also access to the river. We understand that there were some issues, maybe during COVID, but it's still something that should be considered when you have a nice open space like this. So on the Jonesville side, we did the similar exercise of looking at lengths of sidewalk on both the north and south side of the road based on some various constraints. So they're a little bit different length, and also with the similar other miscellaneous items, and with the cost escalation, we're getting towards almost, $1.75 million. So moving on to Cochran Road, where it's the length of the road in between 2.5 miles. This is the 45 mile per hour segment, where there's upwards of 2,700 vehicles per day. And the recommendation that we made for Cochran Road was this paved shoulder concept, where you could do a small amount of widening, 5 to 6 feet on either side of the road, and gain an area that could be used for walking or cycling, with a paved shoulder and a rumble strip separation. Again, there are certainly some challenges on Cochran Road in this area. On the north side of the roadway drops off quite a bit towards the river. And then on the south side of the road, we've got the ledge and the mountain and the hillside to contend with. But also shown here is the limited sight distance along the road based on the horizontal alignment, and the vertical profile of the road presents some safety challenges. This is a picture on the north side of the road, where a lot of the length of the road has guardrail because of this large drop off heading towards the river. And this represents the floodplain area. So trying to look a little more closely to that paved shoulder concept and how much of the length of the road we could actually get this improvement in. It's mainly on the south side of the road, up against the mountainside, is a little more feasible. It would require some rock excavation for some limited parts. But the northerly side of the road, with that picture I showed you with the guardrail, is pretty limiting for doing any widening because of the floodplain and the drop off. And some of the other improvements, safety improvements that we were considering, is because of the curvature of the road and some of those vertical sightline issues, that some additional warning signs could be placed to alert drivers of the curves, and include a supplemental speed plaque to help reinforce that you should slow down with these curves. And then also some new bicycle signing that's available is to give 4 feet of clearance when you're passing. So along the length of the road, some of these new signs could be implemented to help alert drivers and hopefully slow them down more. This is just an image of the floodplain from the FEMA map. This is on the Richmond end. So it looks like a good portion of the roadway that we're considering sidewalk is currently outside of the floodplain, but of course, you can see on the image here, there are areas where there would be a concern for the floodplain. And then over by the Cochran ski area, it's outside of the floodplain, but once you start heading east of there, there are some other limited areas where the floodplain starts to become more of an issue, and then continuing even further to the east around the area of Greystone Road, where you have really all that flat farmland. The floodplain is evident that it totally comes across the road. But as we get down into the area of the village, Jonesville, where we were looking at sidewalk, the roadway is largely out of the floodplain. We have the, excuse me, the Huntington River crossing. And then to the east of that, as we head over to Duxbury Road, a majority of the roadway is outside of the floodplain. So for the Cochran Road portion, again, these are major projects to add that sort of paved shoulder. With the cost escalation, we're upwards of $3 million, which we understand is something that the town is not likely to be able to afford, at least at this time. So therefore, we came up with some short-term recommendations to help improve safety, including this transitional 35 mile per hour speed zone, which Cy is going to present his speed study and his findings after this slide. So some of these recommendations are from his study, and I think this first one is an excellent idea to create a transition between the 45 mile per hour and into the 25 by implementing this 35 mile per hour zone. We could also install some supplemental speed plaques on the speed hump warning signs. We could consider adding some pavement markings to the roadway, for example, slow or 25 mile per hour, which is what you have out there now in some cases, to help reinforce that slower speed through the village areas. We could consider an additional speed hump, maybe after some time, conduct another study and see how the drivers are acting. A typical spacing for speed humps in a neighborhood is anywhere from like 500 to 600 feet. In some cases here, we're upwards of 1,000 feet. So it is feasible to add another device if that's something that the town wanted to pursue. Another idea from Cy's report is more trail marker signs, those brown signs that you see in national parks, just to help alert the drivers that they're coming into areas of increased pedestrian and bicycle activity. And as I mentioned, considering some of these curve warning signs along the roadway within that 45 mile per hour segment, just so people can check their speed when they're hitting these curves so that they can drive safer through there, especially if there happens to be a cyclist or a pedestrian on the roadway at the same time. So that really ends my portion of the presentation. And now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Cy to go over his speed study, and then we can take some questions at the end.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and Cy, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Sai Sarfali, Senior Transportation Planning Engineer at Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Thanks, Eric. So I don't have my computer here, so Eric, would you please run the slides for me?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, so at the request of the town, we conducted a safety evaluation of a posted speed limit on Cochran Road between Cochran ski area and Dugway Road, which is the high-speed section. So, Eric. So we did a windshield survey, which is pretty much like, driving in a car and observing, like, any from the driver's point of view, what are the safety concerns and what kind of speed is comfortable for drivers. So in that, we noticed that the road width is between 20 and 24 feet wide, at different locations, and there are no marked shoulders. Posted speed limit is 45 miles per hour. And some driveways on this segment were kind of obscured with vegetation And, when I was driving, I took that picture of Cochran ski area. So they had like a small, like an A stand with the Cochran ski. So I thought like, no, that's not enough for people to understand that there is a ski area in this place. So so the wayfinding signage, what I thought is inadequate. And there are no dedicated bike and pedestrian facilities on this road. So I also looked at the crash history on this segment. In the last 5 years, between 2019 and 2024, there were 7 crashes reported. There might be more which are not reported, like, maybe somebody like, ended up in a ditch or like, or stalled vehicle. There may not be reported, but those are like, there are like 7 crashes reported, and 1 was the injury crash and 6 were property damage only crashes. And there are no pedestrian bicycle crashes reported on this stretch in the last 5 years. Look at the speed data. This is the map. This is the current speed map from the town. So you can look at the Cochran Road. The purple line is 25 miles per hour, and the green line is 45 miles per hour. And the white lines is like no speed limit on that. So those are more like a local roads. And we installed automated traffic recorders, which record traffic data, including speed and volume, at 3 locations in this segment. So there are 2, location A and location B. As you can see, those are yellow triangles. Those are in 45 mile per hour speed zone. And there's 1 in Zonesville that's in 25 mile per hour speed zone. So we looked at the average speeds and 85th percentile speed. So usually 85th percentile speed is where 85% of drivers, driving at or below that speed limit or the speed. So we looked at the different locations, like location A and B, as I mentioned earlier. A and B are in 45 mile per hour zone, and location C is in 25. Location A and B. Location A, like 85% of drivers are driving kind of like because it's posted 45, so they're driving like 45, 47. Whereas location B is 45, but they're speeding. I can see like they're going 50, 53. And at location C, which is in Jonesville, is 25. So they're right around there, like 25, 26. Next slide, Eric. We didn't collect any bike and pet data. However, we used crowdsourcing application. It's called a Strava Metro, which is mostly like users whoever like bike or walk or users like electric scooters. They participate and they log their activity in that application. So this data is from that application. So this is not like total population of like you cannot say like this is what we have on the road, but there can be more. People may not be using the app, right? So these are the people who are using that app.
Right.
So, I just pulled the 1 year data from January through December for 2024, and notice that, in May and June, we see like, there's peak of bike and pet users on this road. As well as, we can see some more users in July, August, and September. And then it slowly, goes down in the winter time. So this gives us information like, there is some bike and walk and bike activities happening on Cochran Road. So based on all the information that we gathered, and also look at the land use in the vicinity, land use along Cochran Road, came up with some recommendations. These are mostly like short-term and low-cost recommendations. One of the things that I noticed is like, as shown in the speed map, the speed limit jumps from 25 to 45 in both Richmond Village area and Jonesville area. So I thought that's really maybe a concern for most of the users. So I thought, 35 mile per hour transition zone would be really a good addition to this segment. Would you please go to next slide, Alex? So here is a little bit of zoomed in of those recommendations. So Richmond Village, 35 mile per hour transition zone, approximately 0.7 miles. It starts from where the 25 mile per hour ends to all the way to, past the Cochran area. So these are approximate locations, so this needs to be verified in the field. And then add reduced speed head signs, like one at 35 mile per hour zone and then one at 25, like when you're entering into a village area. And then there is a bike clearance sign, which shows you need motorist needs to leave like 4 feet minimum clearance if they notice any bicyclists on the road. Similar for John as well. It's about 0.6 miles of transition zone. So the transition zone also helps motorists to identify that they are entering into a place, in a village setting place. So it gives them some clue that, yeah, we have to slow down. Otherwise, it's like 45. And then when it comes to 25, they're still driving maybe 40, 35.
Right.
So that's what they, and as, Eric mentioned, some pavement markings, and you can see the wayfinding sign for Cochran ski area, the brown with the brown background. We can also add similar those wayfinding signs for any recreational paths or trails in that area. That helps motorists to understand that they're getting into they're traveling in some recreational areas. And they can expect some pedestrians and bicyclists in that area. I think that's.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrific.
Any questions?
First, questions, comments from the board.
I have one. First, thank you for this. I really like both the data and the recommendations. And reminder, we're here to talk about the presentation, the report versus an actual plan, what we would select or not select. I have one really little question. This will seem goofy to some of you. The image of the ski area sign shows a chairlift. I only observed the Cochran ski area doesn't have a chair.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I wonder if there's an alternative.
Universal sign for a rope tower.
Yeah.
That's a subtle thing. It's kind of funny, but I actually mean it too.
Do you want to be accurate? Yeah.
You could explore that.
No, I do appreciate this. I know last time we had looked at the entire, the ideal fully implemented plan, and I think that's not feasible for Richmond at this point, but it is a good goal to work towards. And it's great to have some real professionally recommended options to really sort this out in the short term, because it's not an ideal situation, but also I don't think we're going to spend the
Right.
total $5 or $6, $7 million to get it done right away. So this is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to agree about the transition zones. I've walked there a lot, and I have frequently seen drivers hit the end of the 45 area and take a half mile to a mile to get down to 25. I mean, at that point, the people who were living at the near end of the 20th mile an hour area really aren't getting much benefit. So I think that would be a very nice thing to start to have.
And the reduced speed signs, I mean, seem obvious looking at it now, and it's never clicked that they don't. I drive that road all the time and they're not there, and I'm accustomed to slowing down, but if you're new or you don't drive that all the time, that's makes it much more obvious. So.
Now, I'm going to say something that Pete usually says. He's here and he can say it himself if he wants, but there comes a point with signs where people tune signs out when there are too many. And so you can put all the signs in the world up, but when people have seen them enough, they kind of tune out. So sometimes less is more. You got to choose what you.
Right.
I agree. I mean, the passive controls are hit or miss.
Which I think that's a good description, what Keith just said, the passive versus active, because the speed bumps are active versus passive. I would draw people's attention to this, though, that there really is an interesting curve about, it's almost a bell curve of the distribution of speeds, but there are a handful of people that are going over 70 miles an hour on that road, which is pretty fast for those of us who recall driving it, especially in the middle around curves and up and down. there's not, one would guess there's not much time to react to obstacles in the road at that speed.
Right, but we've been very fortunate that we've had so few accidents. I mean,
Yeah.
one injury accident involving a car, the rest were just physical damage, and no injuries regarding pedestrians. But that said, I've had to dive out of the way of cars on many occasions, so I would love to be able to at least have the paved shoulders, but the $1.6 million is just.
Right.
And that's part of why we asked Eric and his team to put forth a menu of options, knowing that the paved shoulders might be aspirational and something to look for down the road. And maybe in 5 years, the position for finances is different and there's ways to finance that. But there's a number of things here that he suggested I think could actually make a difference.
Okay, we have a hand raised in the Zoom. Lisa, go ahead. Lisa, we're not hearing you. She's unmuted.
David's been able to speak. There she is.
Here we go.
Yeah, so I like the presentation and certainly more in line with what the town would be able to spend. I did have a question about the speed limits. I definitely think that's an issue on the main part of Cochran Road. And I was wondering if it is typical in this sort of situation where you have relatively narrow roads, no shoulders, or even in many places, you know, guardrails on the edges of the traveled portion of the road. And where there's a lot of, or, you know, some amount of bicycle and pedestrian traffic, is it typical to have a speed limit of 45 and, you know, with the blind curves and all of that we have on Cochran Road? Is that still considered reasonable in the industry to have a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit?
I don't know if it's typical, but it is more common on rural, what would be classified as a rural roadway. And that's where Federal Highway has done quite a few studies about rural roads. The amount of cars are lower, but the speeds are generally higher. I think because people have a sense of comfort. There's not so many driveways. And it is a tendency for people to drive faster on roads of this type, for sure.
Okay, and it's still considered safe to have the this type of winding road and no shoulders and bikers and walkers? That's really what I'm wondering is, I mean, you've driven the road, you know, there's blind curves and that cars go over 45 currently.
I would say in response to that, sorry, Jason Shrest is the project manager for this project, and not to speak oversight if you want to go ahead. I guess what I would say is I didn't see anything in Sai's memo that led us to believe that there are unsafe conditions in the roadway. In other words, the crash data doesn't speak to that. So, you know, I guess we can't go as far as saying like this is a typical roadway. It's going to be, you know, this speed limit. It really all depends on the conditions of the roadway, and people that drive the roadway clearly feel comfortable going over the 45-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. So without drastic changes to the physical characteristics of the roadway, i.e. more speed tables or deflections or whatever to inhibit their speeds, posting a lower speed limit is just not an effective solution in slowing cars down in this given scenario.
Okay, but it will, you think the 35 will still work in those transition areas then?
Yes.
Yes, because of the land use, because you see a lot of like houses and there's like a ski area and like a driveway, so they might, you know, it's like, you know, giving driver a clue that they're entering into a village setting. So that's why, you know, that the transition zone helps drivers to slow down. Otherwise, the drivers would not slow down until they see the 25-mile-per-hour speed. sign. So they'll be speeding through that neighborhood until they see the 25 miles per hour speed. So this transition, that's why it's called transition. So it's actually helps drivers to slow down in that area.
Okay.
Okay, Susan Wells, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. And first of all, thanks to Eric and your staff. It's really been a good process and lots of good data and lots of good suggestions and visuals. You did a great job. My first question is, what does it take to lower the speed limit? Because we've been told that the state does a study, and if there's not good enough data or crash data, then it's very hard to get the speed limit lowered. Is that accurate, or how do you do that?
That's always been my understanding as well, that you collect the speeds as Cy did, and it shows you a higher number. So a lot of times officials are hesitant to just try to lower it. So it's over the years, it's always been difficult because the speed data always seems to be higher than what you want it to be. So as Jason mentioned, you really need to make some physical alterations to the roadway that would make the drivers slow down because of those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on this type of road, it can be difficult because of this sort of mountainous terrain and the drop-offs to the river. It's just so constrained in so many areas. You can imagine that when they were building this road, they had all this ledge, and they tried to avoid it, or maybe they took some of it out. But also when I look at the north side of the road up against the river, the picture that I had from being down below in the floodplain area, you can see that the slope of that area where the guardrail is just matches the roadway completely. So all of that was sort of built out and graded for the roadway. So it's not the natural terrain. So it very much was a difficult project, I would say. And that's probably why they didn't continue to build it out to have proper shoulders or sidewalks, because it was just too expensive. And the terrain is a little harsh for sure. But yeah, you can't really, the drivers are going to do what they keep doing, and that's what the speed data shows. So unless you can make a physical change, it can be difficult to make that change happen.
Susan, just to answer your question a little more directly, the study that Cy just presented, that is the study that we need as backup to change any speed limit. So as we've talked about before, we can't just lower the speed limit from 45 to 35 without an engineering study to back that up. And that's what Cy just did for us. And that's where the recommendations for the speed transition zones come from.
Okay, that's great. That's wonderful. In driving around Chittenden County, in lots of places, you see little islands in the middle of the road, which narrow the path, and it forces cars to slow down. Is that something that you've had any recommendations about?
I'll take that. So I looked at that, but given the limitations on both sides of the road, it was a little bit challenging. So I didn't really specify that, but I think in the report I recommended adding a fog line 6 inches wide, which actually with the narrow travel lanes, that also helps in reducing speeds.
Say that again, a fault line?
Fog line.
A fog line.
White line.
I
fog
see.
line.
Yeah, okay.
We've actually
got fog lines.
We have fog lines now.
Oh, you got fog lines now?
I think last spring we did them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
6 inches.
So, yeah, I don't know if that's did anything, but, my last question, or it's really more of a comment, is that I really like the idea of adding a speed hump or two. And one spot that's really a problem on this Bridge Street end of Cochran Road is that we've done nothing with the intersection of Bridge Street, Cochran Road, and Huntington Road, and Thompson Road. And so cars are still coming across at very high speeds across from Huntington Road, across the intersection to Cochran Road. And it isn't until they hit that first speed hump, and sometimes not even then, that they begin to slow down. So that's a very dangerous situation. And it's great to have the crosswalks at Round Church Road, but there has to be a way to slow down the cars that are coming across that intersection.
Signs don't do it.
And signs don't do it, and yeah, it's just very, very dangerous, the speed at which they go. And then you've got the yahoos who think they don't have to slow down for the speed hump at all.
Yeah, I think you need a little bit more of a built environment there. Everything is just too broad. The corners are too sweeping, and you would typically see projects where you tighten up the radiuses so that you purposefully have to drive slowly. You add the crosswalks, you add the built environment to show that it's an important area that gets that type of activity, and I think people would start to respect it a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah, I think that recommendation has been made.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, any further comments from the audience? Okay, I again want to echo what my compatriots and fellow citizens have said. Thank you very much for this study. The select board does need to accept the study. There's a sample motion in the packet if you'd like to look at it.
I move to accept the Cochran Road Corridor Scoping Study.
Is Bard, I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and second, motion by Adam Wood, second by Bart Hill, to accept the Cochran Road Corridor and Scoping Study. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, aye.
Bard, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a pleasant evening.
Thanks for coming
Susan
here.
has
Well,
her hand back up. Susan, go ahead.
Just one more question. What happens now that the report has been accepted? Then what's the next step?
I think the quickest thing to be able to act on is changing the traffic ordinance to add in the 35-mile-per-hour speed zones. Probably some of that signage is fairly quick. And then I think the board will need to take a look at some of the lower cost options and direct us which ones they'd like to implement.
So that's why what I was trying to raise as well. I think we need to put this back on to say, what will we actually implement? So we get the recommendations, accept the study. It's a range of recommendations from the low end is probably $500 and the high end is $2 million, depending on which one you pick, right? And pick what's sort of feasible in the near term. I also was contemplating what Susan was talking about, people carrying speed from the other side of the road, which means you have to go upstream, so to speak, to figure out what you might do to slow people down before they get there. So that might be another part of the conversation. Anyway, I think it's another agenda item, including a traffic ordinance, and then what investments do we want to make and have, in my opinion, Pete, an active participant in that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Sorry,
David's
Bart, I
gonna-
wasn't paying attention.
Everybody
I
can
was,
wait.
but I'm not. Sorry.
We'll have you back in 2 weeks for a more in-depth conversation about what we should put on the road, Pete. So
Okay.
mark your calendar.
Should we just increase the sign budget by 20,000 tonight?
That's-
No,
It's not right.
We didn't make any commitments or decision, but that's the point of the next conversation. What actual steps, investments, expenditures do we want to incur?
Yes, I'd like to be part of that discussion.
Okay, well, let's move on to our next agenda item, which is closely related.
Thanks again.
I'd say, Pete, you don't have to be part of the discussion. You also have to be part of the implementation, so.
Yeah.
Well, the discussion turns into the implementation anyway, so it's all the same.
Perfect.
Okay, our next item is item G, consideration of providing feedback on future land use mapping and housing targets. Various people have been good enough to include in the packet various documents which we need to review on recommendations, CCRPC housing, various things. Keith Oborn is sitting here alertly at the table. We also have Charlie Baker from the CCRPC here. And Virginia Clark is also here on the call. So Keith, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, that's fine. Virginia, do you want to read your memo in, or would you like me to do that?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead, Keith?
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a memo to the select board with comments for CCRCP on new flu map and housing targets. Both the planning commission and the housing committee agree that the new housing targets from the CCRCP are reasonable. The low end has some historical resonance and the mid level is an aspirational goal for the housing committee. The planning commission as a whole has now finished considering the new CCRCP future land use map in detail. For the CCRCP's May 19th deadline, the housing committee, Keith and I, that'd be me, are in agreement with the following changes to the CCRCP map. 1, the 30+ acre upland parcel on the Far Farm on Huntington Road should be changed from rural ag to forestry, rural ag and forestry to transition. And 2, the Thompson Road 160 acre parcel on Governor Peck Road east of the GMP solar array should be changed from rural ag and forestry to rural general. We have no specific comment on the rest of the map as yet. The housing committee is studying the open space portion of the peat farm adjacent to Sadler Meadow to see if any changes is warranted there. The housing committee, the planning commission, and the conservation commission plan to have recommendations finalized by May 31st, which will be submitted to CCRCP. I would add that we had an update on Sadler Meadow. We know that most of those lands are conserved. They're not going to be available for housing at that point. Everything else is pretty much spot on, which where we are right now. So that's basically an overall status of where the committees are with their recommendations. Obviously, Charlie's here for any questions, and so is myself and Virginia.
Bard?
So I've looked at the map, had conversations with a few folks, a few CCRPC staff members. I've heard some comments from folks from other towns about the map, and I just make a general comment that one of the challenges is that literally residents of different towns will say, this parcel right here, that 1 acre, that shouldn't be that color as part of that 200 acres, it should be a different color because it's too steep. This was a comment in a public meeting about a part of another town. That slope is too steep to build there. So to call it, to identify it as something that's potentially developable seems inappropriate. Another example of that is like in our town, the school properties are included in an area that looks like it could be developable. And of course, the school properties are encumbered by the presence of school and related activities. And I think that I share those because they're illustrative of the challenges of creating a map that does the whole county. And I think the closure of my conversation with CCRPC staff was perhaps a way to approach this is with some disclaimer or preface that says these are sort of global maps, but within these colors or regions, there will be specific areas or parcels that are not subject or not available for development. That's really the key concern with people. Are you going to force development someplace where it shouldn't or cannot happen? So it's just it's sort of a general comment with a couple of specific examples. And then my take on the memo from Keith and Virginia, it's really sort of forward thinking, like the changes they propose are thinking sort of over the horizon to a future state, not something that we want to build houses on these parcels like next year or 2 years from now, maybe more like 30 years from now or some other where a situation in which circumstances have changed from the current state. I don't know if that's a fair observation.
I think it is. You know, I mean, there are 11 land use categories associated with this, all with different graduations of what you can do on them. I mean, the lands are going to dictate what you can, and zoning dictates, period, what you're going to be developing on these lands. And correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, with these land use categories, you know, the legislation can now forward legislation based on these categories, such as one thing that's bandied about is a limit on the size of driveways or lengths of driveways is one of them. I don't know if you've heard that being kicked around.
Yeah, I think there's, well, I appreciate all the comments. I agree with all the comments to this point. Your point about regulations, kind of like development regulations tied to these future land use categories, I hope does not really happen. The one thing that is tied to it though is relief from Act 250 regulation. So that is tied to these village areas, planned growth areas and centers. So it is conceivable, and I don't know if you're referring to the road rule, which they did, is not really tied to these map areas, other than the road rule will apply in the tier 2. So it's whatever is not tier 1B and whatever is not tier 3. I'm sorry. I already lost half the room. But in tier 2, so what they have generally been referring to as Act 250 stays pretty much the same. Sometimes they say status quo. It's not really status quo because of the road rule, which is, to the best of my recollection, either an 800-foot driveway, or if you're doing a subdivision, any amount of driveways and streets or private roads that add up to 2,000 feet or more would be subject to review under Act 250. As opposed to right now, it's just 10 lots, right? So you could have a 6-lot subdivision that, because of circumstances, you know, wetlands or slope, have a lot of driveway, and that might be subject to Act 250.
And I would add to what Charlie's saying is these downtown designations are important to understand. I mean, the tiers are going to be for next meeting, and we'll drill down into those a little bit more. But I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that, to the tiers, specifically grants and administrative oversight by the locality and not necessarily by the state, depending on a few certain criteria. So that's where I'm at with this.
Art, would it be useful to look at the draft future land use map on screen just so it illustrates what we're talking about? So you note there are parcel boundaries and then lots of different colors, and if you sort of scan in, you realize the level of detail that various people will comment on about this parcel or that parcel and why is this boundary here. I will share that I have at several times in conversations like at the Planning Commission said, there are a few towns that have this funky arrangement with the mountains. So you got a river that comes up and you've got water that comes off the mountain. And not every town looks like that. You know, South Burlington doesn't look like that, but Bolton and Richmond do. And it's hard to picture what that is like unless you've lived here or thought about it. I also observed after the most recent rains that Waitsfield and Warren illustrate some of the things we're talking about. The river didn't just come up, water came down off the hills with a great deal of force. And that influences what you want to do and don't want to do regarding development and infrastructure.
My last comment, I'm going to turn it over to Virginia. If she has any other comments, is that I'm honestly amazed at what you guys have done with this in such a short amount of time. And I just want to warn CCRCP for that, to be honest with you. I mean, they were given a pretty large task in a short amount of time. So,
thanks.
If I may, I would like to switch to the 5th document, the one that is the housing targets. And Charlie, I'm glad you're here, and because you probably can you make it as big as you can? Because for those of you watching this later via the web or MMC TV, or those of you watching it now, this diagram is housing targets for Chittenden County for the year 2050. And so on the far right, we have by year what these targets would work out to if we're to meet the goal. And then over here on the left, we have a low target, a medium target, and a high target. And Richmond's existing housing units, we have 1,729 housing units. The goal, the high target would be to add 606 more. The low would be 202. Charlie's heard me say this before, we're hamstrung not just by our terrain, but also by the lack of water and sewer. Water and sewer exists in our village area, and it's unlikely that we're ever going to have the money while I'm still walking this earth to make significant extensions of it. So I am worried that I've heard that there is some talk in the legislature of finding towns that don't meet these goals. And I think that I'm very hesitant to say, yes, we can meet that goal. So can you comment on like, where did that goal take into account the river, the mountains, the lack of infrastructure?
Yes.
By the way, could you come up so they can see you?
No. Yes, happy to. So the targets, number one, sorry, if you scroll up a little bit, I think just put it in context. I'm sorry, the other up.
The other up.
Sorry, other left, other right. The county total, I just wanted to draw attention to the county total. And just for you to realize, the county total, if you look at that high number, is 64% more housing than we have today.
Whoa.
Okay, so I'm just saying the water's nice and warm, everybody in, but, and we did, when we were trying to go through this, I think, take into account the variety of dynamics, infrastructure, zoning, resource constraints, including slopes and things. And so you'll see, your number is a lot less than, well, you're in Richmond, Shelburne has 4 times the amount of high target, and probably about the same if you look at lower medium, right? 200 versus 800. And so the infrastructure is definitely a very real component. A couple other dynamics, because these are all big numbers, because it's throwing 25 years worth of growth at you at one number, which is why we tried to annualize it in the right-hand column. And you see, 8 units a year is basically what Richmond has been doing over the last 25 years. And that's the low target. Doubling that to 16 is the medium target. And, quadrupling to, tripling, thanks. That's what the word is. Tripling to 24, is a massive amount. And the same is true countywide. Like doubling and tripling.
Except for Bill's score.
Thank you, yes. There's always the exception that proves the rule. But so we did try to take those things into account. And you mentioned hearing something some legislator said somewhere. That is not the law. There is no consequences.
Just anecdotal, definitely.
Okay.
And, one legislator saying something does not a law make, of that I'm sure. And nor does it make, the governor won't veto it, right? Even if 51% of them decide on something. So there are no consequences. This is really a planning tool at this point. And over the years that I've been here, we've had requests from towns of like, because there's actually been housing target-like language in statute for a long time, like 30 years or more, that kind of said, oh, the RPC should give targets to the towns or some measure of how much housing you should try to be producing. We haven't done that in a very long time, partly because of these dynamics. It's kind of tough. And so the legislature changed the dynamic a little bit. Instead of just RPCs providing these numbers, that county total came from the state.
And so there's a statewide target, which is, got 170,000 housing units.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I'm giving you some of the things which is almost, sorry, that's the high end. And I think we have about 300,000 housing units in the whole state. So it's, you know, a more than 50% increase. And we're at 64%. And again, infrastructure is driving this. So when Vermont Housing Finance Agency was doing the analysis for the state, they did look at where there was infrastructure and also trends, and Chittenden County got a little higher share than the rest of the state, right?
Does make sense.
And there's more available infrastructure. I think it's fair. You know, I mean, we can do a lot more density in Chittenden County than they can do in any other county. So I don't know if that helps give you some more context for these numbers.
Okay.
But the important thing is no consequences at this point. It's really a planning goal exercise.
I will say part of the at least the early conversations at the Regional Planning Commission also included some comments about workforce and supply chain, like do we have enough supply chain to have the materials to build this many homes and the workforce to actually build them, and in the right place at the right time. Even if you're going to extend water sewer, now you have even more infrastructure and workforce. So those are, at least at the Regional Planning Commission, have been recognized as, you know, issues that will come up. They may be bigger issues, frankly, in counties other than Chittenden County.
Like Essex, where are you going to get all those workers?
Well,
And,
yeah.
and I'll give you some more context, including, you know, things I've testified to in the legislature, but this number, and sorry, Josh, if you go down to the bottom number again, the annualized number for countywide, you know, see 1,200 or 1,900, those higher limits was about the housing annual production that we had like in the 1970s. So like these numbers are not really unprecedented.
Okay.
It's just been quite a while since we've had the housing market produce this many housing, or this much housing. And I've said similar things in testimony, which is it took a long time from the 1970s and 80s, and you can see, you know, just the production level just drifted down to the 2000s from what we did in the 1970s. And that happened over, you know, 20 or 30 years. It's going to take a number of years for the market to respond. I don't know how to say this gently, but, you know, Vermont hasn't really been very supportive of
Good thing
development.
it's nice and warm and dry out.
On scale.
That's
It's not.
Oh,
I think he must have just gotten home and this.
If it's relevant or not. maybe.
I lost my train of thought, but it's gonna take a while for the housing industry
Kind of
to
catch
build
up
back
and.
up. And, you know, tariffs and, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics. Interest rates are
Also,
high right now.
So I'm in
They're going up
construction and
this
used to
year.
do like large residential stuff now and used to do commercial where there's multi-units. And I think one of the things that's different between now and the 70s and specifically now is that there's a really big emphasis on like large multifamily.
Yeah.
Or large, expensive single family, and that middle ground of affordable single,
Yep.
2, 4, even 6 family stuff. That market's terrible right now. It's really, there's no one that fills that.
Yep.
That, so there's, in the trades, people are building big built projects and big single
Big
house
houses,
projects.
yeah.
But there's none of that middle stuff. Like there's no houses that realistically, I don't build houses that I would afford. And so it's kind of, that's tough.
Yeah,
And I think
that-
that's true everywhere. So.
And that is the dynamic, but it's not the dynamic in the whole country.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, or if you look at places that have not burdened the industry with as much regulation, and I'm sorry to put it that way, but I think it's fair. I mean, if you look at the coasts, you know, where housing costs have been the most expensive and it's difficult is the West Coast and the Northeast. And so I just as a professional looking at that, I gotta say, well, that's not just because people don't want to.
There's gotta be a common thread there.
And so that's why we kind of started on the regulatory, like maybe we could at least lift off Act 250.
And certainly, you know, I think we've been seeing a lot of our towns have been updating their zoning to be more permissive and supportive of construction. So I'm not saying it's a panacea. I don't,
No, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's good, but it's gonna take a while for that ship to turn.
I would add just a little bit of clarification, you know, a one bedroom accessory dwelling unit is considered one unit. A 6-bedroom McMansion is considered one unit.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's all about scale. I mean, it really is.
And yurts are 1 unit.
Mine's a 1 unit.
Sorry, a yurt.
A yurt is, well, it depends.
Does that have a bathroom?
Can you get an RBES?
Well, I appreciate that clarification. There's been so much scuttlebutt about, oh my God, they're gonna fine us if we don't reach these goals. And I'm like, so we can just tune it out and let the select board of 2050 pay that. I'm glad to hear. I mean, we can't know what the legislature is gonna do, but I'm glad that there's no indication at this point that there would be funds. And I know the other documents that we haven't shown, the maps and so forth. I mean, the reason this is on the agenda is because they would like to get input from us on all of these ideas. So members of select board, members of the public, the documents that are listed in the packet under, they all start with G, so 3G1, 3G2 through 3G4, and then the housing targets. These are all things that would behoove us all to become familiar with so we can give informed advice. Virginia, you've been silent. Was there anything you wish to add?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to say that both the Housing Committee and, well, all three, the Housing Committee, the Planning Commission, and the Natural Resources Group, the Conservation Commission, are still working on this map. So I'm hoping that, Charlie, you will get more information from our groups who have been diligently working on this. The deadline kind of snuck up on us. We were still counting on it being late spring, but then it actually got a date. So especially the Conservation Commission and some of the other land use people are looking carefully at it, and will be making some recommendations that I hope you'll consider further. So we all had a lot of difficulty working with the terminology, with the names that you gave to these different areas. Planned growth area got a lot of attention, as Bard was saying. You know, what exactly does planned growth area mean? And we had to keep explaining that this was, you know, just a name that was given, but it didn't mean that every piece within it had to be planned for growth. That was a problem. We had difficulty working with the with some of the rural designations, the 4 rural designations. They all seem to overlap so broadly in such a way that it didn't seem to exactly make any difference, but it probably does which group you put certain parcels in. So, you know, I'm sure that you had a lot of difficulty coming up with these names that would fit all situations, but we found they didn't really seem to fit our situation very well. So there's that. And that, I think, delayed us in working on the map. Yeah. You have a comment?
I just wanted just a clarification. We did not come up with these names. These were the names that the legislature put in statute that we have to use.
Right.
All the RPCs are using them across the state so that the state eventually gets a somewhat consistent, yeah, at least in terms of labels and colors across the state. So I just want to put that level of accountability where it belongs, which is it was the legislature. We definitely had some input into it, but this is now in statute. So I wish they were a little more fungible, because everything you said is true.
Yeah, well, it's just another way that it is new for us to have the state kind of meddling in our planning and zoning activities that has caused a lot of ambiguity and consternation amongst people. But anyway, I'm hoping that you will be looking out for our further contributions to the mapping question. if you have looked at our future land use map, you will, from 2018, which we're working on right now for our new 2026 plan, you will see that we took a completely different approach, did not put in any property lines to avoid this question that Bard was talking about people looking at their own piece of property and wondering why half of it was in one district and half of it was in another district, and what that meant, and if there were any consequences going to flow from that. So anyway, it's been challenging for us to work with this map, and I'm sure it's been challenging for you all to explain it and work with it. So.
Yeah, and the issues you're bringing up, and certainly, and Bard, you touched on it heavily. This is at a 30,000 foot level. The zoning, as Keith said, is much more important to what you can actually do with your property. This is just setting kind of a directionality for the area that the color is used in. So, there's, doesn't, just because something's a planned growth area doesn't mean there aren't wetlands or some other resource that you can't build on.
Right.
And so that's one dynamic. But let me just conclude with the deadline. We were looking for comments today. The staff is, digesting the comments we've received to date. We're gonna start making changes in response to the comments we've gotten. So I just want to encourage you to get us comments as soon as possible, so that we can actually get them into the mix and at the early end, and we're not going through too many iterations on this. So that's a request, please.
Yeah, so I've been giving people a deadline of the end of May. So hopefully in the next week or so, you will receive these comments. It's time consuming to keep explaining to people, like about the question of there's a school area in the planned growth area, and you have to explain to people that in a planned growth area, you can have schools and you're not going to be growing houses on them. So, these issues just take a long time to convey to people for them to be able to make good decisions about it. So anyway, hopefully in the next week or so, the rest of the information will come in.
Yeah, that would be great. And the next week is great. Yeah, and I think one, rather than focusing on the growth, I think the planned growth area is also the area in which the state is using for the neighborhood designation and tying priority for state investment there. So having a school and having your sewer system and your water system, it's all that infrastructure are all like, those are priority areas is what it's really saying. Maybe you should have said, priority investment area instead of priority growth area. But, I think we're trying to balance investment and regulation and housing growth. The designation program with like tax credit incentives for property owners and things like that. There was a lot that got welded together in this Act 181.
Well, gentlemen, Virginia, thank you so much. We've got to move on, but seriously appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, so
This is a boring time to be the chair.
I don't think so.
okay, our next item on the agenda is in Pete Gosselin's bailiwick. It's update on highway projects submitted to FEMA for consideration as mitigation targets. And in the memo, basically, these are certain projects that we are asking FEMA to pay for. Stage Road culvert upsizing, Snipe Ireland Road culvert upsizing, Hillview Road poured in place concrete head walls, Jones Mill Road culvert upsizing, Cemetery Road culvert upsizing, and Railroad Street culvert replacement. Pete, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you to talk about these.
Okay, well, all of these locations have failed more than once in the last 2 years. They are, I would say, critically, they're in a very critical state, meaning that failure is imminent again. Stage Road especially, that has already cost the town over $500,000 in road repairs in 2 years because of one undersized culvert. The one location which now has the lowest priority would be Hillview Road. Since we just upgraded that, put a brand new culvert in December. We did it with the highway staff. we used rock armor head walls on that, went above the culvert with all the armoring, so it's held very well. It's not a high priority to get the head walls poured in place on that location. The other locations are pretty critical. We obviously know about the Jones Mill siltation problem we have there. We have a culvert that only functions about 40% because the other 60% is buried in silt along with the drainage way that goes through it. Snipe Island Road, we had a multi-plate culvert last year literally blow out of the ground and change its actual characteristic of location. It's moved a few degrees when they put it back into place. The bottom has signs of rot. We know that's undersized compared to the upstream culvert. That's going to have to be replaced and put in a new alignment. The railroad street is probably, I'm going to have to guess, 80 to 100 years old. There's an underground stone box culvert system, which was put in probably before the interstate. It took drainage from the Valley View area all the way down through the village, under the railroad crossing, through the Noise property, and all the way to Richmond Rescue where it daylights. The town did a project 15 to 20 years, I'd say about 20 years ago, on Tilden Avenue, Millette Street, and Route 2. We upgraded and removed that old box culvert system and separated the sanitary sewer, which was partially going into it, and installed all new stormwater through Tilden, Millette, under Route 2, down to the railroad right away, and tied into the existing system from that point to the outfall. Well, it's from that point to the outfall, which is failing, and it's flooding the Noise property several times. It's blowing holes right out of the ground when it takes more water than it can take. So that's got a pretty high priority to it. The issue with that type of project is there's so many different landowners that we have to deal with, and the biggest one being the railroad. Without getting under that railroad and getting a sizable structure under the railroad, that whole project's not going to go anywhere. So Josh and I have talked about that. We feel, the next step after talking to FEMA, if they think this is a legitimate project, to start the process with the railroad about getting through that right away with a new crossing. What else did we leave on there? We got Stage Road, Jones Mill, Snipe Island,
Cemetery
Road. There's a culvert on the gravel portion of that road, which is a 4-foot diameter culvert. It sits directly on ledge. It has toppled over the road 3 times in the last 2 years, taking part of the surface of the road out. It is undersized for the high flows in flood situations. 98% of the time it handles normal rain events. That's a good one to get sized and put a poured in place wall on that one also. The upstream culvert that matches that is actually twice its diameter. It's on Collins Mountain Road, and that was done under a structures grant. I think, Josh, was it 10 years ago or so? We did that one.
At least 10 years, yeah, about that.
Yeah. So that one would complete that crossing through both town roads to be of adequate size. I think those are the ones that we flagged that were, obviously Dugway Road, which is an ongoing hillside stream bank erosion issue, which has undercut the road and now has grown 3 times in size in the last 2 years. That one is a very critical. I would probably rate that as most critical over Stage Road at this point. We stand the chance to have actually losing Dugway Road if we get another 1 or 2 of these type of rain events at 6 to 8 inches of rain in 10-12 hours. Could very easily take that whole road out and cause a major landslide. So
that one,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that one's at a little bit of a different stage with FEMA. We've actually got some cost estimates from the engineer. We've submitted those to FEMA, and we've been involved with them for, I'd say, over a year on the mitigation of that, because that dates back to the 23 flood. These other ones we really put on after the 24 flood, and right now we're at the stage where FEMA has now asked us for cost estimates, so we'll probably be working with Tyler Billingsley to drop some cost estimates to give those to FEMA, and then kind of work these through.
Real quick question before I call members of the board. Dan Noyes was in contact with us recently about flooding from Tilden coming down and wiping out. Is this the culvert that we're talking about?
That's the Railroad Street culvert, yes.
Okay, and that's the one that's gonna be so problematic because of the railroad.
Well, so just to be clear, because this is a classic, where's it come from? Because it doesn't start at Tilden. It comes from way up above it.
From the sky.
Well, it starts at
Well,
the sky and then it starts falls in the hill.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the sim flooding that's generally comes down, will be Millet Street and has caused all the problems on Route 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as Pete noted, just replacing the part that we're gonna do, maybe even next week up on Tilden, all of that water, whether it gets in at the inlet that we're gonna replace next week, or it doesn't get in there and it flows down, it eventually finds the inlet into that same system.
Yeah.
So it's all still going through Railroad Street.
So we're not fixing the Railroad Street problem at all next week. Not that we expect it to be.
No, but I think one of Dan's concerns was once we fix the problem up on Tilden, that's gonna increase the amount of water that comes through Railroad Street.
Speed it up and redirect it.
Well, but to Pete's point, if it bypasses that inlet because it's overflowing, and that only really happens in the flooding times, it's gonna flow down into the street, find another inlet, and still get into that same pipe just further down. So really what we're doing with this fix is, because it's continued to overflow, we're fixing a problem where it's flooding one house at least on Millet Street, or Tilden F, sorry.
And so that sort of drainage, because it comes off the hill and it's headed towards the river, and you start to think, what's between it and the river? The entire
The entire
village.
town, yeah, the whole town.
Like everything.
Yeah.
So, and then the more you channel it, the more water you have moving faster.
Yeah.
So that's
More
sort of the
energy,
fundamental
more
challenge, it
damage.
seems to me.
Yeah.
I have a broader question though, like, given what I hear and read about the current federal administration statements about FEMA, what do we think is happening with FEMA? Are they actually engaging with us? Are they suggesting they're receptive? They will still be funded? They'll still be active?
I mean, right now for the about $2 million plus in damages that we're seeking reimbursement for from the 24 flood, everything we've heard from a representative is that, all systems are go. Duncan's given them, I think, 95% of all the projects and all the information. Our local representative is actually trying to get that wrapped up, hopefully in the next couple of months. So we might even start to see money from them this summer or fall. We touched base with them last week about these mitigation projects. From the sense I get from them, they're continuing to move forward. They want to meet tomorrow with their mitigation expert. So they know these are on their radar. They haven't really said anything about available funding for these just yet. So it could still be a curveball down the road where we put these in, but there's also other grant programs that we could look into if we don't get anything from FEMA. But again, as you say, all federal grant money right now, you're good to look at it with a bit of a skeptical eye, but you're still gonna try.
So, not directly related to this, but to extrapolate that question to the, next catastrophic event that we will inevitably have. We should probably have a conversation or talk or figure out a way to have a barometer of, it might be wise to not instinctively plan on spending $2.2 million in a couple of years when we have roads wash out. If we don't expect FEMA to exist to pay us back. So while we might be receiving commitments on what we currently spend, it might be nice to have a plan to hedge our bets and not spend that again.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Even if that does mean the infrastructure doesn't get repaired as quickly, I mean, there's gonna have to be more of a cost benefit, knowing that we're not basically getting the insurance money.
Yeah, I think that's a good caution to think about. My understanding with some of these more recent ones, you hear about the tornadoes, is that they didn't get the presidential declaration, which is, we got that for this. And sometimes, it could take months, even under a previous administration, it would take months to get that declaration. So, but yeah, I think that's a good point. We might have to move a little slower, have it as one lane, have a conversation about how much do we want to spend.
It's
a really hard thing to do.
conversation.
Yeah, because in some places, we had to move fast because people were literally, they couldn't get out of their driveways, or they couldn't go more than a mile down the road before they were cut off.
Does seem like we could try to maintain the current level of infrastructure, which we all expect and we should have, but we could do that right up to the point that we've made the town close to or insolvent or unable to live up to bigger commitments. Like we've maintained the roads for the fire department to get there. And now we can't pay for the trucks that we need, or we can't give Richmond Rescue the money they need. So there's these roads for them to get there on, and we can't pay them to get there. That sounds
Any further
ominous, but.
Okay, any further questions for Pete or Josh about these projects?
Pete, I have one quick question. This is completely unrelated, and I'm not a civil engineer, but I saw something really cool when I happened to travel, where they had all the culverts poured into concrete and it dipped. So when it flooded over, it just flooded over an entire concrete road and everything was fixed. If I find a picture of it, do you want to look at it? I don't think we can do it now, but it's a pretty cool idea. I'd never thought of.
Tubes were encased in concrete?
Yeah, the whole road. So it was trying to think of, there's a place in town where it was similar. A perfect place for it would have been the flooding on Lily Pond Circle and all that, the road up there. What's the road that flooded?
Snipe Island?
The one off of Snipe Island.
O'Neill.
Yeah.
So they have the culverts always wash out, they go overflow and wash out the road. And basically you would dip the road and put it in slightly smaller culverts and encase the entire thing in concrete. When it flooded, everything that would overflow would be in concrete. So it would wreck the road and you couldn't pass it. It would get covered in stuff, but you just plow it off and you're good. So that's obviously a private road, but it was
Same
actually
idea as a concrete box culvert, basically.
exactly, but you just make sure that the concrete goes up the hill on both sides. So there's like no loose material for it to get to. It was actually a really genius idea, and I haven't seen it anywhere else, and it didn't look that expensive either. So there might be some like environmental concerns that stop us from doing it or something. Who knows?
Well,
okay.
There usually is.
That's it. I'll find something for you, Pete.
Okay, Virginia had a question, and then we need to move on. Virginia?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, Pete, about the Besaw Road situation that you fixed. Is that on your list at all? Or does that need anything more? Is it all totally done and fine now?
It's done. We've actually put a new culvert in. We upsized the culvert from what was there. So we've met the hydraulics for that location. We did it ourselves. We did it in-house. Those people were stranded. They had a 20-foot hole at the side of the road. They were driving through people's yards. So that was one we had no choice but to do. And we did it last year. We finished it. Guardrail's been put in, the paving's been done. So there's a lot of erosion downstream and gully wash all the way down to Thompson Road, major, from all these high rain events. But that's all private property stuff that, we don't get involved in. So.
Yeah, but so the BSO one is not likely to do that again, what it did before, because of the culvert.
It's got rock armoring up higher than the culvert itself. So that's one of the biggest things with culverts. If you're armoring these correctly, you want to armor 110% of the culvert. Where in the old days they armored up like half, 3/4 of the way up to the culvert, thinking all the water will never get that high. Well, as soon as it gets up over that armor, it takes all the soils out behind it. And the type of armoring you're using, if you're not using multiple size fractured rock that lock together, if you use like big, huge pieces of fieldstone with voids in them, the water will flow through those voids and take the soils out behind it. So a lot of things have changed in the last 30 years for construction details. And we use rock armoring, and we use multiple size from 3 foot down to 6 inch. It's mixed and it's all packed, in that flow line. So it takes a lot for that water to penetrate through it.
Yep, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay, thanks, everybody. We need to move on to our next topic, which is consideration of selecting a location for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon crosswalk. We're referring to the kind of things that we have between the town parking lot and over by Richmond Community Church, Congregational Church. We have one up there in front of, between the Hatchet and the Big Spruce. We own one that we haven't installed. And when we met regarding Bridge Street last spring, there was a lot of interest in putting that thing at the intersection of Jelena Court and Railroad Street to make a safer crossing to get to the grocery store. CCRPC has in the past said you put too many of these things in too small an area, and they kind of cancel each other out, people start ignoring them. So the question before us is, do we want to install that light to cross Bridge Street between Jelena Court and Railroad Street? We want to kick it down the road. What would you like to do about it?
Do we have a location that we would want to install it if we do not install it there? I remember this conversation, but I can't remember what our conclusion was.
The only other locations I can remember being talked about was there and then at the THBC intersection. Kind of that one crosswalk that goes across, I think, Huntington Road in that area. If some people have thought that might work. Or isn't there one over by the Round Church too? I think there's one across Bridge Street.
Oh, there is one at the Round Church. Yes,
People
you're
have
right.
talked
We're
about
over
that one
one quarter.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, that's a funny one because it kind of goes, I think, from a driveway across, but it might be another possible location.
I would say of all these locations, the place where I see people crossing the most when I'm in town, anecdotally, would be at the intersection we're discussing at Jelena Court. But that could be dependent on the time of day I drive through town and happen to see that. So that's not, I don't know. I don't have any specific opinion on it, I guess.
Bart?
You know, when I think about, it's not like $1 million financial investment. And we've had other people come to this select board and express concerns like cars, especially at night or in the late evening, wintertime, you know, people that are the intersection literally of vehicles and pedestrians at that intersection.
In bad weather.
I would say the most
unusually challenging.
That location is tricky with the train tracks, and the flashing light would help. And the other location where I have been very surprised with pedestrians, even I try to be very cautious, I'm aware of it, I have a huge truck, it doesn't stop quick, is actually the crosswalk at the very end of the sidewalk across Stone Corral. And I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't want to make any assumptions, but the people that were crossing back towards town seemed less aware a few times it's happened. And I know if I was crossing there when I used to live over there, I was probably also less aware of my surroundings. So I would say that location is would be on my list also, but
yeah, I would agree with Adam. We've heard so many times about people coming roaring up Huntington Road and then they hit the THBC intersection and barely even slow down. That I think you're dealing with much higher speeds at that location than you would be at Jelena Court.
In both directions too, as you're coming out of town, you feel like you're out of town at that point, and there's still a crosswalk there.
Yeah, if I were going to pick any spot, even though I've complained many times about how hazardous Jelena Court to the Railroad Street is, especially in darkness and bad weather with cars, I worry that just having too many of these in a small area would not have as great an effect. I would be more likely to put it over there where Huntington Road meets the THBC intersection. Pete's got his hand up though, so Pete, I'd like to hear from you now.
Okay, well, let me give you an update. So we actually own this light. It's in the box. We purchased it in fiscal year 24. It's a $9,000 purchase, and it was earmarked to go at that Railroad Street, Jelena Court location, along with an overhead streetlight, which we were in the process of working with Mr. Noyes on, getting a small easement to install a light. It's a very dark location at night right there, that intersection. And then now that there's a multi-unit residential dwelling on the other side of the road, Buttermilk, there is a fair amount of foot traffic that cross right there. It'll serve two things. Number one, it'll safety for the people crossing from Buttermilk. But number two, a lot of pedestrians try to walk down that side of the road by the cemetery. This will give them a crossing. So it'll give them a crossing there to walk down the other side and cross, you know, safely in front of the library. So it may limit some of that pedestrian traffic that's walking on the grass on that side by giving them a good, safe crossing. So I just wanted to put that 2 cents in. I think that's the best location. I think the Cochran Road, Thompson Road intersection is a bigger issue, as we heard tonight from Susan Wells. The speed that people come right off the road straight into Cochran, which we witness it all the time. Not saying that couldn't use one either, but so that's just my 2 cents. That's all.
I don't object to putting it at Jelena Court if it could use one.
I guess I'm indifferent. I think ultimately both locations need it, and I don't have a way of weighing those two to make a clear decision. So if Jelena Court is kind of the path we've been down, I think it would be I'd be remiss to change that path, I guess, thinking about it.
Bart?
I'm gonna suggest that we put it where we originally discussed, Jelena and Railroad. And I was not, I wasn't kidding, I was serious earlier when I said, I think we need to consider ways of slowing traffic as it comes from Huntington into the intersection.
Like on a bump or something.
It could be a speed bump, but
I do agree, though. I think that location is particularly, it's worse than the Cochran Road coming into that intersection is coming from Huntington, so.
Yeah, well, we talked about a scalable island at that location, and that got caught up in all the other free-for-all, but David, I don't know if you're in a safe place to hold forth, but do you have any opinion on this?
I don't have a strong opinion. I feel comfortable deferring to Pete. I think he's got the knowledge and experience to make an educated decision.
Okay.
With that in mind, I move to install the rectangular rapid flashing beacon crosswalk at the crosswalk which crosses Bridge Street at the intersection of Jelena Court and Railroad Street.
This is Bart, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon crosswalk at the crosswalk which crosses Bridge Street at the intersection of Jelena Court and Railroad Street. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, I.
Pete, what's the status of that street light you had mentioned?
We got to talk to Dan Noyes. He had verbally already approved us to give us a small square easement to install a pole. We
You guys
actually
are
even,
working on it.
we actually, I even got a price from Green Mountain Power to put a pole in
Cool.
and run a wire and a light. It wasn't that much, if I remember, a couple $1,000s, I think, Josh.
Yeah, it wasn't. The hardest part was getting the easement, and I think that got tied up in the discussion about the sidewalk and the turn across the street from that by the market. He didn't really like the plan that we had over there. Things sort of fizzled up, but now that corner, I think, is sort of moot at this point. We've sort of moved on, at least right now. So it's probably worth touching base with Dan again to see if we can get that. It's only like a 5 foot by 5 foot easement that we need for the pole. It's not much.
Great.
Okay. We just voted, right?
We did, yes.
We did.
I asked for that after we voted.
Okay, just, sorry, I got.
No, it's
well,
fine.
Okay, our next item is still highway related. It is let me get back to the agenda.
Oh, wait, Susan Wells.
Susan, go ahead.
Didn't see her there.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask if this discussion about the intersection of Huntington Road and Cochran Road could come back again. I mean, if you're not going to put a flashing light there, and can we continue that conversation?
I think we definitely need to. It's not gonna stop being hazardous just because we put a light up on Jelena Court.
Yeah, thank you. I would appreciate some more consideration on that intersection.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is consideration of a TA 60 form for the annual town highway financial plan. Of course, we're all very familiar with TA 60 forms, but for those few of us who are not, Josh, could you explain that?
Yeah, so you see this once a year when we apply for the paving and structure grant. And it basically takes a very high level look at the town highway budget. And the big thing is it sort of breaks it into winter and non-winter maintenance. I think it was like 12% or something we put into winter and the rest was non-winter. We sort of used the same number for a number of years. There was never any question from the state. Well, this year when you approved it and I submitted it, they wanted us to take a closer look at the differences between, or the split between winter and non-winter. Part of the thought on this is if you ever need to qualify for an emergency loan, you need to prove that your damage is 10% of your non-winter budget. So looking at that, we need to make a harder look. So what we did was I took the budget, I went over it with Pete, split some things 50-50 between winter and summer. Other things were all winter, all summer, or various splits there in between. So we came up with $709,000 for winter, 1.2 million for non-winter. And I've run that by V-Trans. They like the methodology. They like the percentages on the budget. So I think this will be acceptable to them. And I think this is actually a little bit lower on the non-winter than we had before, which helps us meet a threshold should we ever need an emergency loan for damages.
Great.
So there you go.
This is Bart. I don't want to get stuck on this, but is a road used in the winter or in non-winter?
So they're talking about the amount of money that we put into the road. So like plowing would be all winter, culvert replacement would be non-winter.
Like retreatment of payment
That's all,
is non-winter.
because
which
that's what I think they're looking at it as like, when is the expense incurred? When's the highway department doing that work
versus
versus,
when you use it.
yeah, because otherwise it'd be 50% for everything, right? Because
Maybe like
that is 50/50.
40% with it getting warmer.
Well, I actually started it at 5 months out of the year would be winter. And
Okay.
Jim came back and said, you know what? We look at it as 50/50 because you start transition to plowing. So I think what they're thinking is, when are you spending the money and what are you doing the work in?
Fair enough.
So, but good point.
They don't get-
Reminiscent of the water meter
What's the,
conversation.
I know we're behind a bunch. What is the logic behind like, why does it matter when we spend this money?
I think it's back, I mean, the thing that he referenced in his email was if we ever need an emergency loan because we had damages, it has to be 10% or more of your non-winter budget.
You'd be like, why?
So that's because that's the way the loan program works. And we've never needed one of these loans.
I'm just gonna take a quote directly from my son, but why?
But why?
Okay,
Oh,
this is a broad discussion.
It's also,
I will stop.
That's also a VPR news segment that we could use and go with the but why on
Younger
that.
kid, but how you know?
Yeah.
We gotta
Because
prove
Jim-
that we're
Jim
putting
told
X
me-
amount of money into our mileage.
Yeah.
We have to
Okay.
prove that to get state grants. We gotta prove that we're putting X amount of dollars in maintenance costs directly into our highways.
Gotcha.
So
that-
that's just the
There you
grant.
go.
Josh
makes
gave you the
sense.
more detailed part about emergency loans.
Yeah, and that's
Start
where.
asking Pete, why not you?
Well, no, but I mean, it's separate because like
Yeah.
we had always had to prove you put like $300 per mile or something, which we always
Which doesn't
do.
include salting and plowing. If you're not putting that money into the road, you're using
Well,
it to.
that you have a budget that budgets for $300. I think it's $300 per mile. So we always far exceed that for the grants portion of it, which is why I never paid much attention to the winter versus non-winter until Jim from the state came back and said, actually, you got to think about state aid and these loans. So you should really have a more accurate look at
Didn't
this.
answer a
So.
Josh, just scroll that form down a little bit and they'll see the grant requirement. Right
only-
there.
Oh, yeah,
Winter.
yeah, the grant requirement, but like, I never thought about the state, the loan requirement until Jim came back on that. That was the first, in 6 years of doing these things. No, everybody was just always like, yep, you're good, until Jim said, oh, give me more detail, and it's related to this loan agreement, which I didn't even know was tied to this. But I think that they would look at this in the event we needed a loan. So it's better to have it in place, and there we go.
Awesome.
That's
So-
probably
So
given
they
what's
wanna
happened in
be-
the last couple of years, they're looking at new ways to
Yeah,
fund things. So that's probably, a smart move. So.
could be part of it.
So if they give it a green light, I think we should give it a green
And
light.
I
okay?
move
Wow.
to approve the TA 60 annual financial plan for the town highways. This replaces the TA 60 form that was previously approved on April 7th, 2025.
This is Bart, I will second that.
We have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill to approve the TA 60 annual financial plan for town highways. This replaces the TA 60 form that was previously approved on April 7th, 2025. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And J.I. Next, consideration of approving a pay increase for highway staff who become certified to conduct state vehicle inspections. Road foreman Pete Goslin is requesting to approve 50-cent increases to the hourly pay for highway staff who become certified to conduct state vehicle inspections. 2 staff members recently obtained this certification and are now able to inspect all town-owned vehicles, which is a cost saving over paying an independent mechanic to conduct the inspection. The total cost will be a little over $1,000 per year per employee. Pete, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to throw a simple number out there. So, this is we are a certified inspection station. The town always has had a certified inspector. We lost Dylan LaForce last year to another town and we lost that inspector. So we were unable to inspect any vehicles, any town owned vehicles until now. Kyle, the assistant foreman, got his certification, and then Sean, our new operator slash mechanic, got his certification. We are now back to inspecting all town vehicles, including police, water and sewer, and fire. Just to put it in perspective, to inspect a full-size dump truck at like Allegiance or something, it's anywhere from $300 to $500 for one inspection. We've got 4 of those trucks just in highway. Fire's got at least 4 big rigs. And then all the smaller vehicles, you know, they're at least $100 per vehicle. And the time of bringing it up, dropping it off, leaving it, you know, so you add it all up, that $1,000 is saving the town probably $8,000 to $10,000 annually. So it's really a no-brainer. But this certification was something that we had always given the mechanics in the past. But now that we have this new salary range, it wasn't proposed in the salary range movement. So I want to get this added back in there. We have 2 people that just have achieved this certification, and they've already started inspecting vehicles for the town.
Great. I move to approve an hourly pay increase of 50 cents per hour for the highway staff who become certified to conduct state vehicle inspections.
Is Bart, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve an hourly pay increase of 50 cents per hour for highway staff who become certified to conduct state vehicle inspection. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Moving on down, the legendary Fry Wagon. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about with the Fry Wagon, watching at home later, before recent years, the Parade and Fireworks Committee was a group of independent citizens who owned a large wagon that they used to sell French fries and funnel cakes from on July 4th. As the committee got older, there was less interest in sticking themselves in a sauna all day, making fries and funnel cakes. And they turned the wagon over to us to just store and figure out what we want to do with. We've done nothing with it. And Pete would like it out of the way because it's taking up space at the town garage. The Parade and Fireworks Committee has said we should sell it as it is, minimum bid of $2,000. Now you wonder, why would you want to buy this old thing? The trailer itself is actually not in amazing shape. I think the tires are flat, but the friolators inside are relatively new. And that's really what the person is probably, whoever buys it would probably be wanting. So the recommendation would, well, what the select board could do is put the proceeds into the fund that we use to pay for July 4th activities. Because that's where the coin drop money goes and this, that, and the other. And the committee does have expenses. And that's all I'll say on it. Who would like to, anybody want to comment, ask questions? Anybody want to make a motion?
This is Bart. I move to put the Fry Wagon up for sale with a minimum bid of $2,000 and to also put the proceeds from the sale, assuming that we close the deal on a sale, into the July 4th Celebration Reserve Fund.
Adam, second.
We have a motion from Bart Hill, seconded by Adam Wood, to put the Fry Wagon up for sale with a minimum bid of $2,000 and to put the proceeds from the sale, assuming there is a sale, into the July 4th Celebration Reserve Fund. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, continuing on down, increase for town employees. For the past few years, the annual increase for town employees has been based on the New England Consumer Price Index. The most recent year from April 2024 to April 2025 is 3%. Our budget was built on an assumption of a 3% increase. Now, the police department is a little more problematic because our contract with the union calls for a 2% increase. We have increased the pay grid by more than 2% at times in the past. However, we have to get the union to agree to that. However, because we currently don't have any non-probationary employees in the police department, we have suspended negotiations with the union until such time as we do. So we don't know how the union would be able to agree to that increase. So for now, we're suggesting a 2% increase. And then once Sergeant Cohen and Duke are off their probation in mid-June, we can reopen negotiations with the union and perhaps go to 3% there. Questions?
Based on our history of hiring police officers, are we confident that 3% keeps us competitive, or do we want to avoid getting in a price battle? I mean, I understand that we can attract people by raising wages, but we are also, then committed to doing that permanently. So,
Well, I would think as far as adjusting the grid for FY26, I think going to 3% would be reasonable just to match where the town is. And is anticipate that once Sergeant Cohen is off his probationary status, we'll reopen negotiations with the union on the entire agreement. And at that point, wages will certainly be part of that.
okay.
But your point, Josh, is that we have a current collective bargaining agreement.
We do.
And so if that says 2%,
We gotta
we're sort of
follow
locked to that until we negotiate something else. And to your point, we might then scan the environment and say, oh, we want to raise it further, but it's
guess it-
difficult to do that without
We have
being able to bargain.
renegotiate and makes sense.
Yeah.
It just seems like what we are doing now hasn't
Yeah.
yielded the results we would like. So,
We'll remind people that I think it was just last year we matched Williston, or maybe it was 2 years ago. We matched, I think it was 2 years ago because we still had.
Officer Wilson.
Yeah, so we matched Williston's pay rate, but even since then, the landscape for paying police officers has increased dramatically.
So just a reminder for people who are watching or will be watching, we currently have one officer. Do we have applicants?
I do have an applicant. We're moving towards the background check stage with that officer.
Okay, good.
So this is Barda. I move to increase the town employee pay grid by 3% and the police pay grid by 2% for fiscal year 2026.
This is David, I'll second.
Yay. We have a motion by Bart Hill, seconded by David Sander, to increase the town pay grid by 3% and the police pay grid by 2% for fiscal year 2026. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, this is a fun one coming up. Discussion of process to select the next Richmond fire chief after Chief Gile retires on July 1. Fire Chief Dennis Gile is retiring as of July 1, 2025. The fire department has bylaws, which our town attorney believes to not even be legal. But the bylaws state that the select board appoints the next chief. The town attorney has stated that his opinion is that the town manager has the authority to appoint the fire chief. Josh suggests that we appoint 2 select board members and himself to conduct interviews of firefighters who are interested in the position. The draft process right now is every interested firefighter submits a letter of interest and a resume or list of qualifications. Every interested firefighter will be interviewed. We will ask for feedback on every candidate from the current firefighters. And at the conclusion of the process, the 2 select board members and Josh will make a decision on whom to appoint. There's no motion here, but there is certainly opportunity for discussion. Adam.
Is that a question or? I guess I like that process because it does mimic the process we have used for other kind of higher profile or important hirings around police chief and all that. And so, I mean, the bylaws are debatable. I think, I don't know if we want to get into that in this discussion, but that process mimics what we would do in a situation where there were no bylaws, and it's ultimately up to the town manager. But it does get select board input and buy-in, so the town manager knows that he has the full support, or not the full board, but there is select board support behind that decision. And so if Josh makes a decision, we are all making that decision together and we can stick to it. I think that sounds great. I'm not sure how many applications there be. I have no sense of that really off the top of my head at the moment.
I think at least 2 that I can think of, but perhaps more.
a sum greater than 0 is good,
Yeah.
and a sum greater than 1 is also good.
Very much so.
I guess one thing I would propose, and I think that this is, and I don't know if this is part of this discussion, but I want to get it going, is I think that we need to have a specific time frame on the appointment of chief. I think in undefined appointment is problematic. I think many
term.
we need it, yeah, a term would be ideal. Right now we have, again, it's undefined, right? Someone's appointed. It's not necessarily a lifetime appointment. But it's just an appointment until.
And heretofore used to be
undefined ending.
until Dennis, it was for a year at a time, right?
I don't know if that was ever the case.
I mean, I think Joey's brother was chief for quite a while.
But you could keep getting reappointed.
I
may be
I don't think it was a year. I don't.
Okay.
I guess I'm not up on that history. I don't remember that much. I guess I don't know what the actual number is. I mean, we want it to be a big enough number that someone has the ability to get something done and not be always beholden to the idea of reappointment, but it's a reappointment, it's not an election, so there's some leeway there. I also don't think it's necessarily important that we have a limit on the number of times a person can be reappointed, but it's important because a reappointment also would kind of necessitate some type of review of performance and goals in the direction of the department. And so we want to have that process set in stone and not be a
Lifetime.
yeah, like a lifetime kind of, oh, we will review as we see fit. I think it needs to be planned out.
This part, I like the suggestion that there's a process with a, a term or duration that is specified and certain. So maybe whoever is part of this group with Josh, like Josh should come up with this is how long it's going to be for. And then there is a review of performance and interest and at the end of that term, or as the end of that term approaches.
And I think that there's two parts to that. One, I think the surrounding towns and a lot of towns that term is anywhere between like 3-ish and 10 years. And I feel like the 5-year mark is kind of, 3, 4, 5. 3 is a little on the shorter end. 4, 5 is kind of seems to be the sweet spot where it sets the direction of the department for enough years that people have certainty, but also everyone knows that the trajectory can change if needed as the needs of the town change and personnel needs change. And the other part of that would be that there's the inherent understanding that if you decide to reapply after a certain amount of years, it's not necessarily a guarantee that you're reappointed. And I think that, I think we all know that, but I think that in however this is presented and worded, that needs to be clear that this is an active applicant process. And it might make it a little more contentious, but I think there needs to be that desire to, it just encourages, I wouldn't say turnover, but it encourages new ideas coming in, and we really need that. And like every department needs that right now because there's so much stuff changing. So to keep that fluid, and it doesn't mean that the chief would have to retire. They would still be on the department in any capacity, and they could even be chief again at some point, like, as the needs of the department change. That might get a little messy, but like kind of the understanding that it can shuffle around as the needs of the department change.
So this makes sense to me. I have not thought a whole lot about this until recently, frankly. I'm told that there are different approaches in different volunteer departments,
Certainly.
including some where there's rotating chiefs, where you do it for a term and then you step out and somebody else does it.
Yeah.
So I haven't thought about it. I think of more traditional professional departments where people are promoted and then they're in there with a higher salary.
I think the rotating chief is for a volunteer department. I mean, this is my personal opinion. That would be kind of the gold standard. But the caveat to that is that you need to have a department with an extremely strong roster of leaders. Because if you pick a 3 or a 4-year rotating chief, that means if you have a bunch of members on there for 20 years, you need 5 chiefs. And it's a pretty specific skill set, and to be good at it is a unique qualification. So you need 5 good chiefs in 20 years, and that is a tall bar to get to. And you need a lot of training to do that. So we have a lot of great firefighters and a lot of great leaders, but like stepping up to be chief is a fundamentally different role where you're not a firefighter anymore. You're like a strategist and a manager.
You're El Jefe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Pete, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Probably a dumb question, but would this be just limited to a Richmond resident only? Meaning if, would it have to be a Richmond resident, or if you can't find a qualified person to take this position, would you look in the nearby community to broaden the range of prospects? I'm just thinking, what's the best candidate for Richmond? I don't know this process at all, so I didn't know if it was, only linked to a Richmond resident only, or at this point, would you reach out a little further? I don't know.
I mean, I guess knowing where the fire service is going and how much room for, I guess, the amount of bureaucracy and regulation and paperwork and planning and documentation that's required in the fire service now, proportional to the amount of firefighting, has grown massively. And so taking that into account and knowing that it's much more management and office heavy than on-site firefighting, I think we would be shooting ourselves in the foot to, in policy, limit this to a Richmond resident. I don't think that means that it wouldn't be a Richmond resident this time around. But I think that I can see a really very real possibility of either us in Bolton or Heinsberg or some neighboring town sharing some portion of the chief duties at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Even if that's not the person who shows up and runs the fire scene, if that's the person who helps us do all our compliance stuff from air packs to MSDSs and all that, and then the on-scene firefighting is left to a different title of chief, a deputy chief, an assistant chief, or second chief, or whatever. So I would be against limiting that, and I don't think we are limited to that right now, are we?
I mean, I guess my assumption was it would come from the current members
I
of the
think
fire
that
department.
is my assumption.
But I think per like policy or statute, there's nothing that mandates that, I don't believe. So I guess we could cast a wider net, or we could, for this initial round, say, okay, this is a 2-year term. And we're gonna maybe look to the members and then, but also know that there could be some changes in bringing in some outside voices.
I do think our deadline is July 1st, right? And so to forge I guess I don't foresee a situation where a resident of a neighboring town comes in and wants to just be chief of Richmond for the pay we offer. But and for us to forge a relationship with the town where we are appointing a chief that would exist as chief in 2 towns, I don't think that's going to happen in approximately a month. So I think that it's kind of a moot point for this first round, but by putting a term limit on this, or, putting a term on this, we do need to hash that out, because we're going to be back here. Maybe not when I'm on the select board, but pretty soon. So yeah, that's a good question. Pete, I think you're onto something there.
I just know, the hiring process that I've been through in the last year, the net goes much bigger now and the qualifications change. So you got to reach into different areas now to find candidates. And, you said it perfectly. It's not a simple little job where you fill out 2 papers at the end of a shift. I mean, now you're reporting everything to the state. There's so many, it's so many legal documents you have to do, reporting to the town and everything else. So that stuff has to be kept up. And, it might take a certain person to do that. So
I think realistically, the department is struggling for members. I mean, they've voiced that themselves, and we're going through some transitions. So the chief's also going to have to take on that, the strategic role of, I guess either managing whoever's going to do it, or being a recruiter and doing all that stuff. So there's just the job is very broad to do it super effectively now. It's just different than it was. Yeah, even 5 or 10 years ago.
I mean, I think it also pretty quickly gets into the conversation of increased pay, part-time chief, full-time chief. So maybe this one is 1 year, 2 years. Part of the interview process is how open are you to working with other departments with some of this change? We try to find a candidate that wants to help us make that transition sort of similar to the police department conversation we're having right
That's
now
a
about,
great way to put it.
because where our committee's gone right now with that is what we're looking at is maybe hiring an interim chief who's more administrative and also can help us guide through that process of how do we find the right sort of contract and agreement with Heinsberg for shared services, and having a law enforcement professional to help that would be very helpful. So the current chief, the next chief could help us in that process as well, even if that comes from internally.
Okay,
Sounds great.
so I think these are all good questions. I guess there's no motion here, but one of the parts of this item was to select 2 select board members, and I'm just going to opine for a second. I have a feeling that Caitlin would opt out because of her perceived conflict of interest. Adam, I do not know if you would want to be on it as a member of the department or not. Would you want to be one
Do
of
we
the?
need to decide this tonight, or can I?
We could think about it and discuss it when Caitlin's.
I would like to have a few quick conversations with people about this and kind of mull it over, because I would love to bring my insights into it, and I think I understand it pretty well, but I also can see how that could be a conflict, or maybe not a conflict. I mean, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not putting myself up for it, but there's some concerns there about it being fair and impartial.
And I think even if this goes beyond the July 1st retirement date, I think that we could have Jerry as interim chief while we do the search. He's already sort of acting in
Good
that
point.
role. So if it takes till the end of the summer, it's not the end of the world.
Perfect, great.
Okay, and I would be happy to be one of the members, but.
So touch on this next meeting or.
Yeah,
two
let's
meetings.
bring it back next meeting and that way, we'll have hopefully the full group here.
Sounds great.
Okay, moving on. The next couple of items, anything can blow up into a big amount of time, but this one should be quick. Consideration of approving the local emergency management plan. This is a required update to ensure that all contacts and information is current in the emergency management plan. The plan is in the packet. Is there anything you'd like to call out?
I think the only thing I'd like to say is that CCRPC is in the process of trying to redo 2 of the 3 maps that are in the appendix. Just updating places of employment and I think residences, just to make sure we have accurate maps. They did that for us last year. So if you approve this tonight, I'll probably just swap out those 2 maps with current maps. And we do have to actually have this in by the end of the month. I'm sorry, this one, it slipped a little bit later. I usually like to try to do it in March or April after town meeting, but this one slipped a little bit. So I think if we approve it tonight and you're okay with me sort of administratively putting in current maps, then that should work.
That makes sense. I move to approve the local emergency management plan.
It's Bart, I second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill to approve the local emergency management plan. David, you're unmuted. Did you want to speak to this?
No, I was just getting ready to vote.
Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay. We've got 2 more items before we get to warrants and purchase orders and all that. The next is is in relation to quitclaim deeds on Tilden Avenue for stormwater line that will be abandoned after the new line is constructed. I will let you take that.
I think we finally got this
Worked out.
finally here. So where's the map? There's the map. Let me make sure I remember which number's which.
Right, there was that extra pipe that we.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so
last
this is
meeting.
102 from Witters, and then
Hopefully I can help explain it too. I explained it to Josh, so we'll see.
Well, if you want to explain it, go right ahead.
Well,
Okay.
let's see the map because I can't.
I
gotta
got your map coming right here. Yeah, here you go. So what we looked at last week was the Witters' deed or easement, Quitclaim, sorry, which was gonna abandon or relieve the town of duty responsibility of this line D here, which is the 100-plus-year-old combined stormwater sewer line. As we reviewed that, we noticed, there's part of that here that goes over to 102 Tilden, which is the Nickerson House property. And Pete explained that this was actually abandoned when that project that he referenced earlier in the select board meeting, when we upgraded this portion of the pipe down here, that got abandoned because we're no longer receiving stormwater from there. Sorry, it was coming now through this new pipe here.
Gotcha.
Pete, did I do that well enough?
Perfect. Yep, that's an abandoned line. The new stormwater line, which is shown with a manhole in it, is what picks up that stormwater.
That's already been abandoned previously, and we're just abandoning.
Yeah, just
More of it.
formalizing it so that in 20 years, somebody doesn't come back and say, well, there's water in there and the town took it over in other places, so we need you to do something with it. I don't anticipate anything happening to this line because it's disconnected, but let's just,
Could cover our butts.
put the suspenders with the belt, as our lawyer sometimes says.
Sounds good. I move to approve the quitclaim deeds for 86 Tilden Ave and 102 Tilden Ave on the condition that construction of a new stormwater pipe is completed, and the appointed town manager, Josh Arneson, to appoint the town manager, Josh Arneson, as a duly authorized agent to sign the quitclaim deeds once the conditions are met.
Ms. Bard, I'll second that.
We have a motion by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve the quitclaim deeds for 86 Tilden Avenue and 102 Tilden Avenue on the condition that construction of a new stormwater pipe is completed, and to appoint town manager Josh Arneson as the duly authorized agent to sign the quitclaim deeds once the conditions are met. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I. Bard, I.
And J.I. Okay, our last item before warrants, purchase orders, and minutes is consideration of approving liquor licenses. Richmond Market, DBA AGS or AGS DBA Richmond Market has applied for a second-class liquor license, which has allowed them to sell beer and wine off-prem. Sweet Simone's has applied for a first-class liquor license and an outdoor consumption permit. First class is to serve beer and wine on-site. And outdoor consumption permit would mean they could serve it on the sidewalk. So there's two motions here. You can do them separately, or if you want to combine them, I guess you could. But any questions about the licenses?
I move to approve a second-class liquor license for AGS in Vermont Inc. and I approve a first-class liquor license and an outdoor consumption permit for Sweet Simone's.
Ms. Bard, second those motions.
Okay, we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve a second-class liquor license for AGS Vermont Inc. and to approve a first-class liquor license and outdoor consumption permit for Sweet Simone's. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, I.
David, I.
J.I. Okay. That means we are now down at approval of minutes, purchase orders, and warrants. The reason we're voting on two sets of minutes is because one of the sets of minutes was misdated at the last meeting and it was not technically legal. So we need motions and any comments or changes that need to be made to those minutes.
I didn't have any comments or changes. You have anything?
Okay, would somebody like to move the minutes to the 21st?
I move to approve the minutes of 4/21/2025.
Ms. Bard, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve the minutes of 4/21/25. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, I.
David, I.
J.I.
I move to approve the minutes of 5/5/25.
Ms. Bard, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve the minutes from May 5th, 2025. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, I.
David, I.
And J.I. Next is purchase orders.
No purchase orders for this
No
meeting.
purchase orders,
Yes, yeah.
so you can't move them. Okay, next is warrants. Any questions about the warrants?
This is Adam. I move to approve the warrants as presented.
Ms. Bard, I'll second that.
We have a motion from Adam Wood, seconded by Bart Hill, to approve the warrants as presented. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, I.
Bard, I.
David, I.
And J.I. I'd like to point out that, amazing as it may seem, we are actually ahead of schedule.
How did that
Up.
happen?
Caught up.
Okay.
Start out fast, finish strong.
Okay, items for next agenda, clearly the discussion of the fire chief.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's gonna take up some time too.
So elongate.
And I think there will be, I actually hope there will be a few members who would want to come in and have time to come talk about that with us, just so I think that would be like not a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah.
So we were going to talk about the two select board members. Are we going to talk about
In the term,
okay,
and then
We want to codify the term in any
I
way.
guess we would talk about kind of
outside candidates?
just, outside candidates looking forward. I don't think that's like I don't think that's gonna be an option that we're gonna be able to
In the near
pursue in the near term, but we should let's get ahead of it so we know where we're going. We have an idea where we're going in
Okay.
2, 3, 5 years or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, so those are sort of the three main topics.
And I think that the people who we would want to have at least come weigh in we would want to have Jerry weigh in.
Yeah.
I think, I know he's been working with surrounding departments in just a bunch of capacities to kind of do stuff. And so he's probably got a good barometer of what that looks like.
Right.
As far as other people, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, I think we could also return to the question that Sue Wells asked us to consider, which is to say, what can we do to reduce speeds coming off and going into Huntington Road?
Agree.
It seems to me we could couple that with next steps based on what we've seen in the Cochran study. So what are the things we can do on Cochran Road itself? And then, given the speed that people are carrying from Huntington, include that
Extra 100 yards or whatever.
in scope of the conversation. What can we do there? Like
Yeah.
speed bump?
Yeah, the discussion's been a year in the making or more, but we need to.
We
don't want to let it die on the vine because it is a hazard. And it does impact the people who live on that end of Cochran Road who are afraid to step out of their houses. Okay, if you think of anything else, you know how to reach me or Josh. And so moving on, I don't see any need for an executive session. So I believe at this point we are ready for a motion to adjourn.
This is Adam. I make a motion that we adjourn at 10:15 PM.
Bart, this is a second of that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn made by Adam Woods, seconded by Bart Hill. Please state your name and your vote.
Adam, aye.
Bart, aye.
David, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, there's stuff to sign, but otherwise we are adjourned.
Night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Night, David.
Night, everyone.
David, are you back in Vermont?
I am. I actually just got home.
All right, well,
Are you
welcome
back
home.
And no answer.
Thought about stopping by, but I wouldn't get there in
Oh,
time.
man.
Okay.
Did you
No
want me to
worries.
swing by? Did you want me to swing by and sign tomorrow?
I think we're good. I
Okay,
got enough signatures here in the room. But thanks.
okay. Night, everyone.
All right, we'll see you.
Night, Dave.